Melfiora is calmly sitting on a park bench enjoying what looks like a perfectly made sandwich. She eats with such satisfaction that it catches the attention of an older man passing by. Melfiora lifts the basket of food and offers to share. The man eagerly accepts and takes a generous bite, and his eyes light up immediately. The flavors are so rich and well-balanced that he blurts out that he could eat it forever. However, when he casually asks about the meat, Melfiora calmly replies that it's made from backhorn. At that moment, his expression shifts. Backhorns are known as dangerous monsters filled with lethal poison. Realizing what he's just eaten, the man abruptly vomits. He can't comprehend how anyone, especially a noblewoman, would consume something so deadly, unless she's the very person he's heard rumors about. Melfiora, on the other hand, remains completely unbothered, continuing to enjoy her food. To her, even the foulest monsters can be turned into a delicious dish if prepared properly. Others may not understand this, but she's confident that someday she'll find someone who does. The following day, Melfiora attends a grand banquet hosted for the nobles. The place is filled with tables overflowing with exquisite dishes. She's genuinely enjoying herself, eating everything she can, when a familiar noblewoman approaches. It's the attendant, Mrs. Talbot. With a firm tone, Mrs. Talbot reminds her of the true reason she's there. With this, Melfiora's cheerful expression fades instantly. The real purpose of the banquet is to celebrate the bountiful harvest and allow nobles to test the season's offerings. More importantly, it serves as a social gathering for the nobles to meet potential partners. As the daughter of a count, Melfiora is expected to find a suitable fiancé there. Faced with her stepmother's threat to send her to a convent if she fails to find a partner this year, Melfiora has little choice but to comply. Even her father says he would accept someone as lowly as a knight, so long as they are decent, just so she can finally secure a match. Reluctantly, she attends the banquet. However, as she scans the room, she notices the nobles whispering harshly behind her. In that moment, Melfiora realizes that no noble truly wants to be associated with her. Melfiora decides to head to another section of the banquet where the knights have gathered, thinking she might find a potential fiancé among those who don't recognize her. However, her thoughts are abruptly interrupted when chaos erupts and an enraged monster suddenly appears. The guests instantly scream and scatter, fleeing in panic. Amid the commotion, Melfiora notices an elderly couple struggling on the ground. She rushes to them and urges them to escape together, but before they can move, a mad backhorn emerges right in front of them. Her instinct tells her to run, but seeing the couple's terrified faces, Melfiora instead dashes away while shouting to draw the beast's attention, making herself the bait. The monster charges toward her, but just as it's about to strike, she closes her eyes. Then a man arrives, beheading the beast in the blink of an eye. Standing before her is a man with a blood-stained sword. The whispers around her rise, talking about the infamous blood-mad Duke Rogier. His unusual eyes lock with hers, and Melfiora stares in awe. Yet Rogier misreads her gaze, assuming she's terrified of him. He has always been described as an eccentric fiend, and yet before her, he seems strikingly beautiful. Shaking herself back to reality, Melfiora rises gracefully and introduces herself with proper noble etiquette. Rogier pauses, surprised that she still thinks of formalities after such a close call. He asks if she's unharmed, but Melfiora focuses on him instead. Blood from the slain backhorn has splattered across his face. With concern, she urges him to rinse it off immediately. She explains that mad backhorn blood carries magical toxins, and if it's swallowed or absorbed, it can cause intense stomach aches and fever. She also adds that if the creature hadn't been mad, its blood could have been used to make sausages with the proper preparation. With that, she insists he clean himself and change at once before any ill effects occur. Rogier, however, seems far more intrigued by Melfiora's extensive knowledge of monsters. She quickly apologizes for talking too much, worried she may have overstepped. But Rogier simply hands her a vial of purified water, pointing out that she might have ingested some of the beast's blood herself. Rogier's gaze then falls on her gown, which is stained heavily with blood. Without hesitation, he takes her hand, intending to find her a change of clothes. Melfiora hesitates, insisting that the stains can be removed by soaking them in water. Rogier, however, is more concerned that the presence of beast blood might disturb her, but she appears utterly unfazed. She casually mentions butchering a monster last week and being covered in even more blood back then. Rogier is taken aback, shocked by what she just said. When he asks for her name, Melfiora formally introduces herself. Rogier bursts into laughter because of this, finally understanding who she is. He's heard plenty of stories about her, the noblewoman who eats monsters, famously nicknamed the Voracious Villainess. In their world, magical beasts and unusual plants, collectively called monsters, are unlike any ordinary living creatures. Consuming them is dangerous, as their blood contains magical toxins that can cause vomiting, fever, or worse. However, Melfiora is the rare exception. Known as the Voracious Villainess, she's far more interested in their culinary potential. As strange as it may seem, the fallen beast actually looks delicious to her. She's already imagining the dishes she could prepare from its meat, because if she's going to eat it, it might as well be tasty. Roger's stunned expression makes her think she's made another mistake, and Melfiora awkwardly smiles to hide her embarrassment. Unexpectedly, this flusters Rogier, who quickly averts his face. When she asks what's wrong, his reaction only intensifies and he hurriedly composes himself before taking her hand again. It's at this moment that Melfiora realizes that this man, unlike many others, isn't frightened by her at all. As they walk, Rogier suddenly pauses before asking Melfiora if backhorn meat actually tastes good. Assuming she's had it before, he's curious about its flavor. Melfiora hesitates but eventually admits that it is delicious. She's received this question many times, and her honest answers usually make people avoid her. She explains that backhorn meat tastes similar to beef, though it's tougher, so she puts extra effort into tenderizing it to make it delicious. Instead of being disturbed, Rogier becomes intrigued and asks how she removes the magical toxins. This stuns Melfiora, as no one has ever shown genuine interest in it before. Unlike everyone else, Rogier actually listens carefully and believes her. Overwhelmed with emotion, Melfiora lowers her head to hide her tears. Regardless, Melfiora explains that she removes the magical toxins from beasts by bleeding them using special tools and purification spells. Hearing this, Rogier's eyes light up with curiosity. He asks if she could prepare some monster meat for him sometime. Melfiora is taken aback and asks if he has a strong digestive system, explaining that magical toxins aren't easy to deal with, but if the beast isn't mad, its meat is just like any other. However, her warning only makes Rogier even more eager to try it. He brings Melfiora to his pavilion and tells her to make herself comfortable. They're soon greeted by Chaos, Rogier's aide. Rogier introduces them to each other before instructing Chaos to bring Melfiora a change of clothes. Melfiora enters one of the tents in the pavilion and is immediately struck by the number of weapons displayed inside. Rogier has also prepared a tub of water for her to wash up, though she insists that he should go first. Without hesitation, Rogier removes his upper clothing, stunning Melfiora even more. She's seen hunters and knights wash outdoors before, but this time feels different, and yet her eyes can't seem to look away. Rogier suddenly speaks, asking what's wrong. Caught off guard, Melfiora answers honestly, admitting that his physique is distracting her. Rogier is genuinely surprised, seemingly unaware of how striking his figure is. Melfiora recalls how effortlessly his arms move when he struck down the beast, a truly majestic sight. But Rogier simply brushes off her comment and begins washing up in the tub. With that, Melfiora steps forward to join him in washing up as well. While washing, Melfiora shyly asks if she could perhaps learn to slay beasts herself. Rogier doesn't disagree, but after glancing at her slender arms, he insists that she should leave the slaying to him. He doesn't realize the weight of his words at first, but when he sees her expression, he quickly tries to defend himself, explaining that it's only because he's already accustomed to fighting. Changing the subject, Rogier asks if there's any particular meat she wants to try so he can hunt it down for her. This immediately lights up Melfiora's eyes with excitement. His territory is known for rare kinds of monsters not found in her lands. To her, that feels more like a luxury rather than a threat. Rogier notices the blood on Melfiora's face and gently wipes it off. In return, Melfiora helps him wash his face too, carefully caressing his cheeks and running her fingers through his hair. For a brief moment, the two share an intimate atmosphere until Chaos barges in and interrupts them. He scolds Rogier for standing in front of Melfiora half-naked, pointing out how inappropriate it is to expose himself to a count's daughter. Later, Melfiora changes into a beautiful dress that Rogier borrowed from the queen. She wears it gracefully, while Rogier casually holds the beast's head. Melfiora is amazed by this and boldly exclaims that she wishes she could slay monsters too. Her reaction surprises the others, as most noble women would faint at the sight. Chaos watches the two and secretly thinks his master may have finally met his match. Rogier escorts Melfiora back to her carriage, where she formally thanks him and bids farewell. Yet even as they part ways, both clearly wish to see each other again, already planning gifts for their next meeting. Rogier promises he will slay a royal moodle for her, making Melfiora's mouth water at the thought. Trying not to sound demanding, she gently reminds him that a beast tastes better if captured alive. With this, Rogier grows more excited, seeing it as a challenge worth trying. Days pass, and Melfiora visits Rogier's pavilion once again, this time bringing a special gift. She presents him with jerky made from Scat's bit, a beast found in her territory. Without hesitation, Rogier takes a bite, startling Chaos, who rushes to stop him because the food hasn't gone through the poison tester. Yet Rogier loves it. He even forces Chaos to take a bite, and soon, both of them are enjoying the jerky already. Rogier tells Melfiora that he's looking forward to trying more of her monster dishes. His words leave her stunned. She's so used to people thinking she's strange for her unusual tastes, even though she sees nothing wrong with them. But the Duke's warm acceptance touches her deeply. Overwhelmed, Melfiora hides her face as tears of joy well up in her eyes. When asked, Melfiora pretends that she's simply reluctant to say goodbye today, and Rogier mirrors her hesitation. Still, they have no choice but to part ways once more. As she leaves, Roger promises that they'll talk again next time. Melfira has never been fond of banquets, yet after meeting him there, she truly enjoyed herself. She wonders if he's merely being polite or just curious about her, but deep down, she can't help wanting to keep her hopes high. Snow is already falling over the Marcharade lands when Melfira returns from her travels. Before she can enter the house, her father, Ghislaine, is already waiting outside, waving her over with a furious expression. She assumes he's angry because she failed to find a suitable fiancé, but Ghislaine reveals he received a letter from Roger, formally asking for her hand. Melfira initially thinks he's simply asking for her help, but Ghislaine clarifies that it's a marriage proposal. The request shocks him, as Roger's position as Duke doesn't match their family's humble status, so receiving such a letter leaves him flustered. Even Melfira sweats at this. Meanwhile, in the pavilion, Roger and Maxim meet inside a tent. Roger reports everything that happened during their hunt, explaining how he carried out his plan without casualties. Maxim is satisfied with the result, but he notices Roger's formal tone and brings it up. While Maxim addresses him casually, Roger speaks with distance. He once called Maxim Brother Maxim, but he deliberately avoids it now. Although Maxim and Roger are blood siblings, everything changed 17 years ago when Maxim was named Crown Prince and Roger was adopted by the Galbraiths. Since then, an invisible line has separated them. With Roger's stubbornness, Maxim has no choice but to conform to his formal manner. Then he suddenly notices the basket in Roger's hand. Roger tries to hide it, but Maxim presses for answers. Surprisingly, Maxim seems to know about Roger and Melfira, and bringing this up catches Roger off guard. Taking advantage of the distraction, Maxim snatches a piece of jerky from the basket. Roger tries to stop him, but Maxim quickly takes a bite. Impressed by the taste, Maxim asks about the meat, and Roger admits it's scatspit jerky, which is a spiny monster, so Maxim grows intrigued and assumes Melfira prepared it for him. When Maxim hears his brother speak of Melfira so fondly, he asks what Roger plans to do next, knowing it's unlike him to take an interest in someone so quickly. Roger, however, brushes off his words, saying he'll be on standby before leaving to return to his men, ignoring Maxim's attempt to stop him. Roger is frustrated by his brother's words, but he can't deny that Maxim has a point. After all, he rarely talks to anyone like that. Melfira's image lingers in his mind, still unable to believe that she's actually called the voracious villainess. He remembers the way she fearlessly shielded an elderly couple at the banquet. Deep down, he knows she has managed to captivate him completely. Chaos and several men soon approach Roger to report that the Backhorn's habitat is now under control. Pleased with the news, Roger also relays Maxim's orders, but Chaos seems more curious about whether Melfira will attend their future banquets. Roger notices his teasing and immediately suspects Chaos of telling Maxim about her, though Chaos quickly denies it. Left alone, Roger's thoughts drift back to Melfira. He remembers how she didn't believe him at first. The tears in her eyes reveal how accustomed she is to being pushed away. With that, he makes a vow, promising he'll never let her wear that expression again. Meanwhile, back at home, Melfira still can't believe they received a letter from Roger. Ghislaine informs her that it arrived 7 days ago, delivered by a messenger riding a blaze eagle encased in a luxurious jewel bearing the Galbraith crest. Hearing this, Melfira regrets not seeing the magnificent bird herself, and even her father admits how beautiful its feathers are before steering the conversation back to the proposal. Ghislaine wants to know exactly what happened between her and the Duke at the banquet. Melfira recounts everything honestly, but Ghislaine remains unconvinced, as it was only their first meeting after all. As she reads the letter again, Melfira doubts the sincerity of Roger's words, suspecting there must be another motive behind his sudden proposal. Ghislaine also shares her doubts and decides to draft a response while they think of a proper reason to turn him down. That same night, Melfira has just finished her bath when she notices the letter on her table. She reads it again, admiring the Duke's name, but her thoughts quickly return to her father's words. It was only their first meeting, and perhaps their excitement over monster meat had carried them away. Then a thought sparks in her mind, realizing Roger likely has no one to share his fascination with monsters and has no one to talk to about them. Since Melfira enjoys eating monsters, she can imagine the connection he might have felt between them. Suddenly, the letter in her hand begins to glow. It starts by recalling their encounter at the banquet and mentions his subordinates trying the jerky she made. But in the final line, he writes that he will visit her on the 18th of the month of Sirius. Melfira and Ghislaine exchange confused glances upon reading this, realizing that the said date is already tomorrow. Going back to her room, Melfira feels flustered, though she still doubts Roger's true intentions. Yet with their meeting scheduled for tomorrow, there's no point in worrying too much. Seeking comfort, she holds the framed photo of herself with her mother from when she was younger. Speaking to it as if her mother were there, she tells her about Roger's proposal and wonders whether the Duke will appreciate the viability of all types of meat, just as her mother once had. Her thoughts drift back to those childhood days watching their family lands with her mother. The land was cold and barren, and her mother had asked her for help. It was then that Melfiora inherited her mother's research. Even though the world has yet to recognize it, she works tirelessly, hoping one day it will. The next day, her stepmother Celia knocks on Melfiora's door and finds her still unprepared. Melfiora fumbles for excuses, though the truth is she hasn't even woken up until Celia arrived. Celia walks in and inspects the room before scolding Melfiora for neglecting her appearance after being told to find a fiancé, calling it a disgrace to her noble title. She also brings up Rogier, warning that despite his high birth, he is infamous as a violent, bloodthirsty, blood-mad duke. Then suddenly, cries of dragons fill the air. Melfiora rushes to the window and sees a flock of dragons soaring across the sky. Looking closer, she realizes Rogier has arrived, riding his dragon along with a few of his men. As they speak briefly from the window, Celia orders Melfiora to shut it immediately, but she refuses. Instead, she tells Rogier to wait in the pastures in the north, where they will have their formal discussion about his marriage proposal. Without hesitation, Rogier departs and Melfiora, after closing the windows, remains stunned and flustered, hiding her face behind the curtains to conceal her reaction. So many thoughts and admiration run through Melfiora's mind that she almost doesn't notice Celia calling her repeatedly. Her stepmother explains that she isn't feeling well and wants Melfiora to inform Ghislaine for her. Though Melfiora wishes Celia would stay for the discussion about the marriage proposal, Celia insists on leaving, claiming her father's permission is enough. She even makes harsh remarks about Rogier, finding it improper that he arrived on a dragon, but Melfiora cannot accept her insults. Before Celia leaves, Melfiora boldly declares that she will accept the Duke's proposal, leaving her stepmother to storm off in fury. Later in the pasture, Melfiora finally meets Rogier and they catch up, though she can't help feeling self-conscious about her appearance. Chaos also soon arrives, apologizing for the earlier confusion and sudden visit, explaining that Rogier could no longer wait for her response. As the three continue to talk, Rogier suddenly becomes serious and admits he is curious about one thing. With this, he holds Melfiora's hair intently and inspects it, wondering why it is so soft and fluffy, even though Melfiora thinks it is simply a mess. Then they decide to head over to Rogier's gift to her. Rogier points to a big sack that contains his gift. Melfiora finds it hard to believe, but the thing inside is actually a monster, just like Rogier promised in their last meeting. This instantly makes Melfiora beam with joy as she hides her face to keep her reaction from showing. She can't believe he actually brought one, so she thanks him wholeheartedly for his gift and even wishes to take a little peek at what's inside. With that, Rogier grants her wish, but the sack doesn't seem to be moving, so Melfiora assumes the monster is already dead. However, Rogier simply takes the cover off to let her see for herself. Inside is a royal moodle with sharp horns and majestic fur. But it's not just any other moodle, it is a golden one, which means after being eaten, it will be of good purpose too. Moodles are usually white monsters with horns and their pelts are highly prized. Golden moodles in particular are famous for their use in creating clothing, though their meat often goes to waste afterward. The one Rogier presents to her is fattened up for winter, and since it is a herbivore, she believes its meat will taste better than any other monster. As Melfiora shares her knowledge about the creature, Rogier looks impressed. He then takes her hand and places it over the moodle's heart. That is when she realizes the creature is still alive. Rogier has only put it to sleep using magic. Deep inside, Melfiora is already imagining the grand feast she can prepare using its meat. Despite her thoughts, she is overwhelmed with excitement, flustered, and unable to contain her joy, and she keeps thanking Rogier repeatedly. As Ghislaine and his men also arrive, the two parties begin to formally talk. Ghislaine and Rogier greet each other properly before moving straight to the main topic. Melfiora almost forgets that Rogier is actually there to ask for her hand in marriage. While the conversation continues, Melfiora asks her father for permission to allow the dragons to hunt in the mountains, but he mistakenly assumes the moodle is meant to be food for them. Unbeknownst to him, it is actually for his daughter. Ghislaine is surprised to learn that the Duke already knows about Melfiora's unusual taste for monsters, but Melfiora mentions that Rogier even wants to taste her cooking, so she would also like to open a research facility for him. Ghislaine hesitates for a moment, unsure about it at first, but Rogier suddenly speaks up. He explains that he understands Melfiora's habits and is fully aware of her reputation. Realizing Rogier is truly interested in Melfiora, Ghislaine is touched, but Rogier quickly speaks, explaining that they need to deal with the moodle before it wakes up. Only then does Ghislaine realize the creature is still alive. They come closer to inspect it, and Ghislaine admits it is both a valuable and dangerous gift. Since Rogier is the one who asked Melfiora to cook it for him, he wants to watch her prepare it. Ghislaine notices how fond Rogier is of her unusual hobby and grants his request, allowing his dragons to feel at home and ordering Melfiora to accompany Rogier to the research facility. They ride the dragons to reach the place, and since it is Melfiora's first time, she is thrilled by the experience. Rogier jokingly warns her not to eat his dragons, and Melfiora defends herself earnestly. Soon, the research facility comes into view below, so Melfiora orders Rogier to descend. Her voice, however, carries a hint of nervousness. It is her first time showing someone how she prepares monster meat, and this place is her late mother's research facility. As they approach, Melfiora reflects on her situation. If the dude truly accepts her, her father will surely feel relieved. Determined, she decides to let Rogier see everything, and with that, she will also let him see the true reason behind her unusual taste for monsters. That quiet thought lingers in her mind, wondering how Rogier will react once he learns the truth. At the facility, Rogier immediately notices the magic circle with ancient language carved into the floor. Melfiora explains that the circle was originally created by her mother, but she made some improvements to it as well. This will also be where they begin processing the monster. As Rogier studies the inscriptions, he realizes that the circle is designed to allow Melfiora to absorb the magical toxins from monsters. However, he can tell that this circle alone isn't powerful enough to fully extract everything. Melfiora leads him deeper into the facility, where she retrieves another tool she uses, a cloudy quartz that extracts both magical energy and blood. Rogier is impressed by how exquisitely crafted it is, but that's not all. Once Melfiora channels her magic into it, the quartz appearance begins to change gradually. Then, Melfiora makes a bold request to Rogier. She wants to see the decapitation technique he once used on monsters again. Outside, the golden noodle is already laid out in the magic circle, and Melfiora prepares to begin her ritual. However, handling such a massive beast can be challenging, so she asks for the knight's assistance. Rogier raises his hand to signal them, and the men quickly rush to the noodle to start deherring it. Rogier explains that his knights are not only responsible for subjugating monsters, but also for collecting their pelts, horns, and claws for resources. In fact, shaving fur is one of their specialties, so they manage to finish deherring the noodle in no time. Melfiora then places her hand on the golden fur collected from the noodle, but more than anything, she's thrilled by the thought of the different dishes she'll be able to create using the royal noodle's flesh. At the same time, Rogier prepares to decapitate the monster. But before he can act, Melfiora recites a prayer for the creature as her way of showing respect for its precious life. She then uses the magical language to activate the circle, and only then does she allow Rogier to move. Rogier swiftly draws his sword and, with a single blow, beheads the massive monster. As expected, Melfiora is astonished by his flawless swordsmanship. Afterward, Melfiora begins extracting the noodle's magical energy and blood. She uses the cloudy quartz and once again recites a prayer in the magical language. This time, the noodle's blood starts to levitate and flow into the quartz. As the liquid continues to pour in, Melfiora notices the sheer amount being absorbed. Cracks begin to appear across the quartz's surface due to the overwhelming volume. This startles her, as this has never happened before, but she can't stop the ritual now. Seeing her distress, Rogier immediately asks what he can do to help, and Melfiora instructs him to fetch another piece of cloudy quartz. Rogier acts swiftly, replacing the cracked one with a new one. With this, Melfiora regains confidence that she'll be able to finish the extraction. She then recites her final prayer, channeling her magic until everything is fully absorbed into the quartz. However, the ritual drains much of her strength, and she nearly collapses, but Rogier moves in time to catch her. Afterward, the knights inspect the noodle's body. They expect it to look disheveled after such a powerful ritual, but to their surprise, it remains fresh and intact. Melfiora explains that she only extracts magical energy and blood, as removing moisture would make the meat tough. By retaining its natural moisture, the flesh will have a flavorful texture. Rogier begins to wonder if Melfiora was the one who devised such impressive methods, but she gives credit to her mother for the original concept. She shares a story from 17 years ago during the Great Drought, when many people suffered from starvation. Their family's territory was poor and lacked resources due to infertile soil. In response, her mother began researching ways to utilize monsters as a food source. If this research could be perfected, troublesome monsters could be transformed into a valuable supply of delicious meat that might save starving people. So after her mother passed away, Melfiora vowed to continue her work. However, she admits that recently she's been enjoying the taste of rare monsters, so she uses the process partly for her personal interest. Then Rogier asks about the extracted magical energy from the monster, and Melfiora casually explains that it's mainly used for making fire, as it can sustain both cooking and lighting for up to 2 months. She admits she's never really considered any other purposes for it, so Rogier suddenly bursts into laughter. Although Melfiora's innocent use of the energy isn't problematic, her research surpasses even that of royal mages, so if such concentrated magical energy were mishandled, it could easily be weaponized to destroy nations. Melfiora freezes, realizing she had never thought about it before, as she's used to handling smaller monsters. Rogier's tone then softens, explaining that while rumors remain rumors, careless handling of such power could lead to great tragedies. With that, he vows to protect her from any harm that might come her way, which deeply touches Melfiora. However, Rogier then brings up another rumor, something about her supposedly sipping blood. Melfiora quickly denies it, assuring him she has never done such a thing. His expression then turns serious as he admires her striking hair and eyes, declaring that he'd be willing to lay down his life for her. Melfiora snaps back, thinking he's just teasing, but he insists he's sincere. Flustered, she compliments his eyes, hair, and even his cape and dragons in return. Both grow increasingly embarrassed until chaos interrupts the moment. Melfiora quickly shifts the topic, saying they should start preparing the meat already. As Rogier watches his dragons devour their food, Melfiora arrives with the official hunting permit they'll need to enter the mountains. Rogier is delighted, explaining that his dragons have been complaining about their current meals as they have quite the insatiable appetite. While they talk, Rogier's stomach suddenly rumbles, surprising even him. It's actually the first time he's felt such a strong hunger, but the royal moodle's flesh laid out before them is enough to stir anyone's appetite. Talking about the meat makes them both even hungrier, so they decide to slice off a small portion to grill and eat. Naturally, they target the rarest and most prized cuts, so the two exchange a knowing smile, already anticipating their little taste test before the rest of the work begins. They prepare small cuts of meat for a quick barbecue, and Rogier hands Melfiora a bottle of special herbs. She takes a small taste and is instantly delighted by the rich aroma and flavor. It turns out Rogier took it from their head chef without asking. Laughing it off, they remind themselves that this is just a simple taste test, not them sneaking around behind their companions' backs. They sprinkle the herbs over the meat, then use the monster's blood to ignite a steady flame. Once done, they place the meat on the grill. For safety's sake, they agree to wait until it's fully cooked before eating. However, Rogier can't help but complain impatiently. As the meat continues to look more appetizing, Rogier grows increasingly impatient, though it still needs more time on the grill. Just then, Chaos spots them cooking and immediately accuses the two of sneaking snacks while acting all lovey-dovey. Rogier quickly defends himself, insisting they weren't doing anything suspicious, though the scene is clearly obvious. To divert the situation, Rogier hands Chaos the hunting permit and tells him to take and feed the dragons while he stays behind with Melfiora. Chaos teases him, pointing out that the dragons are already whining from hunger while he's sneaking bites. Reluctantly, Rogier offers him one skewer, but before they know it, the rest of the men appear behind Chaos, expecting their share as well. Melfiora gives her permission since the knights are usually stuck eating awful monster meat. So they cook more and the men gather around the grill. Rogier prepares a plate for himself, but Chaos interrupts, insisting on tasting it first. Rogier refuses, prompting Chaos to tease that Melfiora wouldn't like his attitude. The two end up bickering like children over the first bite. Finally, Melfiora calls Chaos over to test a skewer she's prepared. With one bite, Chaos is instantly delighted. She casually asks if he feels anything strange, though what she truly wants to know is whether it tastes good. Chaos doesn't disappoint, showering the meat with praise and complimenting it multiple times. He even remarks that it would pair perfectly with a good drink, and Melfiora is happy to hear this as well. Hearing Chaos praise, Rogier grows increasingly impatient, unable to wait any longer to eat without confirmation that the meat is completely safe. He immediately asks Chaos if he feels unwell, but the effects of magical toxins usually take time to manifest, sometimes up to 30 minutes or even the next day. Rogier, however, clearly can't wait until morning, so he urges Chaos to declare the testing complete and announces that they should start eating. Melfiora, who's just as excited, tells the knights to dig in before the meat grows cold. She assures them that if anyone feels ill, she has medication prepared in advance to treat it. With that, the group erupts in cheerful shouts and begins feasting on the monster meat skewers. With the first bite, everyone reacts the same way, with pure delight. The meat is delicious and tender, just as expected from a herbivorous monster. Rogier approaches Melfiora to compliment her brilliance, but she humbly insists that it was her mother's research that made everything possible. Still, Rogier admits he never imagined monster meat could taste this good. In the past, he had eaten it without proper processing, which was always a challenge, and everyone else agrees. They eagerly ask Melfiora to teach them her methods and even suggest bringing another beast for practice. They regret how much good meat they've wasted, but Melfiora understands that eating monsters is still considered taboo. As Rogier continues enjoying the skewers, Melfiora suddenly calls out to him. He assumes it's about the food, but instead she wants to bring him into the facility. At the same time, one of the knights quietly watches them leave with curiosity. Inside the laboratory, they're greeted by piles of books and materials. Rogier is immediately stunned by the sight. His eyes scan the room until he notices the Scatsbit's spines neatly arranged nearby. Melfiora explains she used them for hunting, and her resourcefulness only deepens Rogier's admiration for her. As Melfiora prepares tea, Rogier learns that she usually hunts monsters alone, which surprises him. He had assumed the Count, or at least others, supported her research, but many in her land have mixed feelings about what she does. Even the very people her mother once saved during the famine refused to admit they ate monster meat to survive. Melfiora further explains that many in their land practice animism, making the consumption of monster meat a taboo. Despite this, she continues her mother's research. Rogier then asks why she keeps pursuing her work in a place where no one understands her. With teary eyes, Melfiora recalls the tragedy that happened 17 years ago, the very same incident that led to Rogier's adoption by the Galbraith family. To continue their conversation, Rogier gently pulls Melfiora to sit on the couch. He senses that speaking face-to-face is difficult for her, so he tells her she doesn't need to look at him while talking. He wants to hear more about her story. After all, he came here to ask for her hand, but Rogier already knows from his personal investigations that Melfiora is shunned by high society. She believes that marrying her will only ruin his reputation and become a burden. However, Rogier makes it clear that he doesn't want her to give up her research. Instead, he invites her to continue it freely within his household, where she would have full support. Melfiora assumes he's merely curious about her work, so she offers her assistance, but Rogier interrupts, saying the only thing he truly wants to know is how she feels about him. Being widely known as the blood-mad duke who slaughters monsters, Rogier wants to know Melfiora's opinion of him. In that moment, Melfiora realizes that when he said he wanted to understand her, what he really meant was understanding her feelings toward him. Melfiora scrambles for an answer, blurting out that she doesn't find Rogier scary at all. In fact, she thinks he's rather handsome. Her words immediately fluster Rogier, leaving Melfiora to believe she might have said something wrong. She insists that many others would probably agree with her, yet Rogier only looks away in embarrassment, which confuses her even more. As Melfiora continues to praise every detail of Rogier's appearance, he struggles to believe her sincerity. He thinks she should be frightened of him, especially of his life as a monster slayer, but instead her eyes shine with pure admiration. She tells him she'll never forget how bravely he fought the monster during the banquet. Rogier mutters that being constantly splattered with monster blood and lacking refinement hardly makes him admirable, but Melfiora disagrees. To her, the courage to fight is more noble than any title. After a pause, Rogier shifts the topic and asks what Melfiora truly thinks of him as a fiancé. She has never seriously considered it before. If they were engaged, his title as a duke would easily fulfill her father's expectations, though their difference in status might still become a concern. Melfiora quietly reflects, imagining what her daily life would be like by his side. The thought of seeing Rogier from morning until night makes her heart flutter, yet she knows how insignificant she might appear beside him. Her life has always revolved around research, and all she's ever wanted was a partner who would let her live freely and pursue her passions. Her silence prompts Rogier to call her name, and Melfiora remains lost in thought. If his father were to approve of their union, her days might feel like paradise. Yet she wonders if that happiness would come from love or simply from fulfilling a well-calculated dream. After some thought, Melfiora answers Rogier's question with one of her own. Why would he choose her as his fiancée when so many noble women surely seek his hand? Moreover, she doubts his people would ever accept her. She's the shunned, voracious villainess. Her reputation could tarnish Rogier's name and affect how others see him if they were to marry. But Rogier disagrees. He believes his people would come to like and accept her. He brings up the Urzane Woods, a vast forest within their lands overrun by monsters. No matter how many he hunts, more always appear, and the magical toxins building up there drive the creatures mad. Rogier explains that protecting their territory is both his burden and the duty that comes with the Galbraith name. To him, monsters have always been enemies to slay, so it surprises him when Melfiora admits she actually enjoys eating them. Watching her prepare monster meat opens his eyes to a completely different perspective. As soldiers, they sometimes eat monsters for survival, but none ever thought to properly drain their magical energy first. Rogier admits her method is brilliant, though Melfiora still feels it's not enough for her to be accepted in his lands. She reflects on how her research might help Rogier and his people. If her studies could contribute, perhaps her late mother's work would finally see the light of day. Her thoughts are cut short when Rogier speaks again, promising her everything, including protection from the cruel rumors that haunt her name. He sincerely wishes for her research to thrive and serve his people's future. For a moment, Melfiora doubts him, assuming his proposal is purely practical and devoid of romance. Yet she eventually gives her answer. She admits that his offer would save her, even if she feels unworthy of someone like him. Rogier misinterprets her hesitation as rejection, but it's quite the opposite. Melfiora gladly accepts his proposal, driven by her passion for research. She explains that while other women may have their hobbies, her joy lies in her studies. Since Rogier's duty is to hunt monsters, she promises to prepare delicious meals from his hunts, so none of the meat goes to waste. She continues eagerly, listing the many ways she hopes to serve him. But above all, she expresses how honored she feels to marry him. Her words make Rogier blush, though the tender moment is cut short when Claude appears at the doorway. He announces that the mansion is ready to receive them and that Count Ghislaine is waiting, prompting the two to rise and leave together. On their way to meet Ghislaine, Claude discreetly stalks Melfiera, advising her not to speak too openly about her research or the condition of their lands with strangers. Roger overhears this and senses something peculiar about Claude's tone, realizing he must have caught parts of their earlier conversation. Still, such caution is understandable. After all, a duke with a tainted reputation proposing to a count's daughter would naturally draw suspicion. When Rogier finally meets Ghislaine, he presents the contract for their engagement. Ghislaine remains uneasy, uncertain whether Rogier truly intends to marry his daughter. But Rogier feels nothing but pride at the thought of bringing Melfiera to his lands. Ghislaine, though thrilled, cannot entirely shake off the memory of the banquet incident. Rogier recalls it as well, how, when the monster appeared, all he wanted was to kill it and be done. Yet Melfiera never looked away from him, unafraid. Deep down, Rogier is certain that Melfiera will one day love him for who he truly is. The proposal may have come sooner than expected, but family pressure left him little choice. Ghislaine understands and, though uneasy, signs the contract. What troubles him most is Melfiera's unusual appetite for monsters, but Rogier assures him that it doesn't bother him in the least. As Ghislaine nervously finishes signing, Rogier asks if there's anything else he wishes to say. Ghislaine hesitates before wondering aloud why a Galbraith, descendants of a lineage known for adoption, would suddenly seek a fiancé. Rogier, anticipating this, begins listing all the reasons he wishes to marry Melfiera. In the end, Ghislaine bursts out laughing at Rogier's detailed praise of his daughter, but Rogier insists every word is true. Ghislaine's tone then turns serious as he speaks about the widespread belief in animism across their lands. He admits that, if things hadn't changed, he had planned to send Melfiera to a convent despite his reluctance. As a count, his duty is to protect his people, but as a father, his greatest wish is to keep his daughter safe. He therefore asks for Rogier's assurance that Melfiera will be protected under his care. Rogier solemnly swears to do so, giving Ghislaine the confidence to trust him completely. 10 days after Rogier's return home, Melfiera busily packs her belongings and research tools with the help of her attendants. She moves briskly through the facility as staff members consult her for guidance. Following the Duke's orders, everything in the facility is to accompany her, and he has even left men behind to assist in packing. Their engagement has been officially recognized since Rogier's visit. Melfiera recalls the contract signing with her father, a document imbued with a faint magical aura. The Duke assured Ghislaine that the magic represented only his vow, that their engagement could never be broken. Beneath the formality, Rogier had simply wished to witness Melfiera's sincerity and resolve. In that quiet moment, the two shared a tender connection. Though their betrothal was formalized, Ghislaine had one final request, a secret he did not wish Melfiera to know. Rogier soon learned the truth. It was Ghislaine himself who spread the rumor that Melfiera consumed monsters, crafting her image as the voracious villainess to protect her from those who might exploit her research. Ghislaine admitted his intentions, and Rogier firmly asked that he no longer act that way in the future. In the present, Melfiera examines the contract again, feeling its strange power when Mullen interrupts to report on the cargo awaiting transport. She gives him clear instructions and sends him off. With everything ready, Melfiera finally feels prepared to depart for the Galbraith's lands. Still, she wonders if other engaged couples move in as quickly as they do. Rogier reasons that Melchior's winters are long and he cannot afford to delay. He also wants her to acclimate to their climate and adjust to life with his family. Her gaze drifts to a photograph of her and her mother, wondering quietly how it must have been for her. Just then, Herman bursts in to announce that her father is waiting. After exchanging brief words of farewell, he escorts her to the study, but she pauses, realizing she may not return to this room for a long time, unless the engagement somehow falls through. When she knocks, she finds Celia sitting in her father's chair. Melfiera demands to know why, and Celia explains that as her stepmother, it is proper for her to see her off for marriage, though she can't resist sneering about the dragons. Melfiera coldly asks for her father, and Celia merely gestures outside, where he stands speaking with Rogier's men. Celia reminds her not to leave anything behind. Melfiera plans to leave the royal noodle's fur for her father and brother, but Celia mocks her for it again. With a forced smile, Melfiera offers a polite farewell, but Celia refuses to let her go quietly, accusing her of seducing the Duke. She reminds her that her son, Louis, remains the rightful heir to their lands, to which Melfiera calmly replies that her loyalty now belongs solely to the Galbraith family. Her composure only fuels Celia's anger. She begins comparing Melfiera to her mother, Elise, whom she admits she despised. Melfiera never knew Celia had even met her mother, but before she can ask, Celia warns that if she ever fails, she will be sent to a convent with no home to return to. When all is said, Melfiera leaves the study in silence. Though she knows Celia has always disliked her for her strange interests, she still feels oddly relieved to have heard something about her mother at last. Melfiera steps out of her home wrapped in a thick coat, where her father greets her warmly. Seeing the coat reminds her of Elise, who wore the same one on her wedding day. Elise came from the south where snow was rare, and Ghislaine fondly recalls how thrilled she was at her first snowfall, so much that she caught a cold the next day. As they reminisce, emotion overtakes him, but their moment is interrupted by the deep growl of a dragon. Looking up, they see Rogier descending from the sky. Melfiora runs to meet him as soon as he lands. Rogier takes her hand, kisses it, and addresses her as his betrothed, making her cheeks flush red. Ghislaine chuckles at the sight, but Rogier only smirks, teasing Melfiora further as she flusters in embarrassment. After confirming that she has everything prepared, Rogier's gaze falls on a pile of garbage beside them, offering to burn it for her. Then, without delay, he announces that it's time to take his fiancée with him. Ghislaine watches as Rogier helps Melfiora climb onto the dragon. Though Ghislaine hopes to see her again by spring, Rogier calmly states that he intends to keep her in his lands until the wedding. Even when Ghislaine insists on preparing as a family, Rogier promises to provide everything necessary for their union. As the dragon ascends, Ghislaine remains uneasy, but Rogier vows to protect Melfiora at any cost. His eyes flick to the pile of rubbish below, and with a single motion of his hand, he ignites it into flame, startling everyone. Claude protests that it's too much, but Rogier merely smiles and invites him to join his men if he wishes. Claude refuses firmly. The flames surge higher, burning bright like fireworks, a radiant symbol of the new life the two are about to begin together. Those left behind in the martial raid home panic as the blaze spreads, while Rogier and Melfiora continue soaring through the skies. Though Melfiora feels a pang of longing for home, she can't deny her excitement for what awaits her in Rogier's land. Rogier advises her to simply stay true to herself, saying that her only duty as his lady is to bring him comfort. Melfiora, uncertain how to do that, admits her hesitation, but Rogier reassures her with quiet confidence. He promises that she'll have complete freedom to pursue her research, even offering to capture monsters for her experiments, a suggestion that delights her. His men, too, seem eager for her cooking again, still remembering the dishes she made with the royal noodle. Listening to Rogier speak, Melfiora realizes just how kind and thoughtful he truly is. As the hours pass, the sky deepens into a warm crimson. Rogier glances at her hair, remarking how its color mirrors the glow of sunset. Embarrassed, Melfiora denies it, but Rogier insists it's even lovelier when it shimmers with light, just like when she activated her magic circle back then. He then gently pats her head, leaving Melfiora utterly flustered. When night falls, Melfiora notices the soft luminescence from the dragon's horns, their glow allowing the riders to see each other even in the dark. She wonders if people on the ground can see those lights too, perhaps mistaking them for falling stars drifting across the heavens. The thought makes her smile. After several hours of flight, it finally arrived at the port town of Avner, a place under the king's rule. The real destination, however, is Fort Rittard near the border, where they often rest during long journeys. Rogier mentions that they'll find her a room in town so she can rest more comfortably for the night. To his surprise, Melfiora seems far more interested in whether there are forests or rivers near the border. She insists she doesn't mind staying at the fort, for what excites her most is the chance to encounter new monsters, especially the fish-type ones currently in their spawning season, or even to see the mysterious monster fruits said to grow in the nearby forests. Rogier explains that the fort is plain and purely functional, but Melfiora's imagination runs wild. She can't stop picturing all the rare creatures she's only read about, thinking how incredible it would be to see, and perhaps even taste, them for herself. Amused, Rogier laughs and admits there are indeed some Xanas in the river of this time of year. At once, Melfiora's eyes sparkle, for such creatures don't exist in her homeland. Yet, when Rogier mentions that setting traps would take time, her excitement fades a little. Wanting to cheer her up, he promises that they can still try tonight, so they might enjoy Xanas for breakfast the next morning. As the night deepens, their conversation drifts from monsters to meals. Melfiora finds herself touched by Rogier's warmth, noticing how he never hesitates to go out of his way just to make her happy. Remembering Chaos' words that Rogier's men were used to eating poor-quality monster meat, she asks him about it out of curiosity. Rogier admits it's true, though he can hardly call it proper cooking. The meat, he says, was always tough, gamey, and barely edible. During long expeditions, they had no choice but to roast it thoroughly to avoid getting sick, but even then, it often caused stomach aches. Melfiora quickly guesses that they hadn't removed the magical toxins properly. Rogier recalls trying various kinds of monsters, but none ever proved suitable for eating. In fact, he confesses that he once collapsed from the toxins himself and barely remembers what happened afterward. Before they know it, the journey has brought them to their destination. Rogier tells Melfiora to hold on tight as the dragon descends. He carefully guides it downward until they land safely at the fort for the night. As Rogier's men arrange accommodations with the caretaker, they mention that their commander has brought a lady with him, much to the caretaker's shock. He immediately apologizes, worrying that their quarters might be too plain for a noblewoman. From behind, Melfiora peeks out, wanting to assure him that she needs nothing fancy at all. Just then, Rogier calls to her, suggesting they unpack what they'll need for the night. As Melfiora rummages through her things, he gently insists that she rest in town instead. But Melfiora's mind is already set. She prefers to stay at the fort. Its simplicity reminds her of her research facility where she often fell asleep on the cold floor after long nights of study. Though Rogier remains unsure, she smiles reassuringly, confident that as long as he is there, she'll be perfectly fine. Rogier shows her a modest room with only a bed and a small table. He insists she rest after their long flight, but Melfiora assures him she still feels energetic. Suddenly, she catches a faint scent and follows it curiously, which makes Rogier a bit uneasy. She soon discovers two men by the furnace cooking simple grain porridge. Startled by her sudden appearance, the men freeze, but Melfiora offers to help. She insists that plain porridge won't be enough to fill them, so she unwraps a portion of leftover moodle meat and suggests adding it to the pot. Seth hesitates. He wasn't part of the taste tests back at Marcha Raid and fears the monster meat might be unsafe. Mullen, however, encourages him, explaining that Melfiora herself had prepared that special meat. Still, Zeth asks whether anyone suffered side effects. Mullen confidently replies that everyone was perfectly fine. To convince him, Melfiora slices a small piece of meat and grills it herself. When it's done, she offers it to Zeth, assuring him that she's already removed the magical toxins. But Zeth still eyes it suspiciously. Before he can refuse, Mullen steps forward, eager to try it himself. Melfiora quickly prepares another slice for him, and Mullen takes a big bite without hesitation, instantly delighted by the flavor. He starts describing it in detail until a dry, sarcastic voice cuts through the air. Both men freeze and turn to see Rogier standing in the doorway, clearly sulking. He asks Melfiora if he might have a taste as well. Flustered, she takes his hand and leads him to the furnace, insisting she'll prepare a piece just for him. Rogier tries to remain composed, though his sharp gaze lingers on the two men. After she grills a skewer for him, Melfiora shyly offers to feed him herself, but Rogier refuses to open his mouth, leaving her exasperated. Remembering how her nanny used to feed her younger brother, she tries a playful approach, urging Rogier to open wide, but he remains uncooperative. Finally, she recalls how her nanny would always call her brother by name to get his attention. Dropping her usual formality, she calls out Rogier's name directly. Startled, he looks at her and she immediately slips the meat into his mouth. Rogier chews, then admits that it tastes good, much to Zeth and Mullen's relief. Encouraged, Zeth finally eats his portion and is pleasantly surprised. Overjoyed, Melfiora suggests mixing the remaining meat with vegetables into the porridge, while Rogier continues to sulk in silence. That night, everyone eats together, delighted by the flavor. Melfiora beams with pride when Rogier asks how she prepared it. She explains that she simply diced the meat, fried it lightly, and mixed it into the porridge. To her surprise, Rogier scoops a spoonful and feeds her himself. Embarrassed, she tries to insist she can eat alone, but he continues until her bowl is empty. As they talk, Rogier tells her she should address him less formally, just as she did earlier. He reminds her that most engaged couples do so. Though it feels strange, Melfiora realizes she must get used to it eventually. Her cheeks redden as she repeats his name, and Rogier, amused, suggests she give him a nickname instead. After thinking for a moment, she shyly chooses to call him by his second name. At once, Rogier's eyes glimmer faintly, and he quickly turns away to hide them. Alarmed, Melfiora calls for help. When Mullen rushes in, Rogier explains that he merely lost control of his magic for a moment. Melfiora is still shaken, wondering if it was caused by the monster meat she fed him. But Mullen reassures her it happens because Rogier's body stores more magic than most people can handle. Once he releases some of it, he'll feel fine again. Rogier agrees, saying it's perfect timing since he plans to use that energy to catch Xanos tomorrow. Even so, Melfiora can't shake her worry. Mullen's explanation reminds her of her mother's illness, how an excess of magic power could turn toxic. She remembers her childhood vividly, her mother, often feverish, bedridden from the burden of her own strength. Though her mother called it a frail body, Melfiora later learned the truth. Her mother's incomplete magic circle prevented her from fully purging magical energy from monsters. The excess built up inside her, poisoning her from within. Still, Melfiora remembered the beauty of her mother's magic, the way her hair glowed, her eyes shining like jewels whenever she performed a ritual. That brilliance had inspired Melfiora to follow in her footsteps. Over the years, she discovered that humans, being physically weaker than monsters, couldn't survive such magical overloads. Their bodies broke down long before their minds could go mad. Back then, she had been powerless to save her mother, but now she vows to complete her mother's research and use it to protect Rogier. When morning comes, Melfiora awakes in her room wrapped snugly in Rogier's coat. The last thing she remembers is pacing anxiously, worrying about his condition. Blushing, she realizes he must have found her asleep on the floor and carried her to bed. She immediately goes looking for him and finds him calmly sipping coffee. When she checks on him, Rogier assures her that he's perfectly fine. Without warning, he pulls her gently into his arms, making her cheeks flush scarlet. He presses his forehead to hers to prove he has no fever, and Melfiora feels her heart race, only to notice his skin is cold as ice. Roger admits with a smirk that he got drenched in the river. Remembering his promise to catch Xana's for her, guilt floods through Melfiora. She asks again if he's truly alright, but Roger insists he is. Trying to help, she wraps his coat around him again to warm him. Roger then proudly tells her they caught something she'll love. Still worried, she hesitates, but he pulls her closer, teasing that they should just go out like that to stay warm. Melfiora can only blush deeper, wondering why Roger has suddenly grown so comfortably spoiled around her. Melfiora discovers that the Xana's Roger captured is still alive, trapped, and swimming inside a metal net. Excited, she decides it's time to cook it. Though she tells Roger to rest, he insists on helping, saying that just being by her side already makes him feel better. His words fluster her, and when he hugs her from behind, reminding her they're engaged and she should get used to it, Melfiora can only cover her face in embarrassment. Fortunately, Szeth suddenly walks in, giving her a reason to escape, though Roger still doesn't let go, leaving Szeth awkwardly greeting them both. After gathering everyone, Melfiora cheerfully announces that they'll be cooking the Xanas. The men are stunned, but Roger looks genuinely excited. Melfiora also explains she wants to batter and fry it, so she asks someone to fetch oil and flour, and Szeth volunteers without hesitation. After a few minutes of preparation, Melfiora is ready to begin her ritual. This time, she plans to use magic circles drawn on pieces of oil paper, which Roger finds brilliant. She decided to use this method, knowing that drawing on the soil wouldn't work since the Xanas would only wet it. Before sunrise, Roger instructs his men to remove the Xanas from the metal net, and they quickly follow his orders. He reminds them how dangerous the Xanas can be, warning that one wrong move could result in broken bones. Despite his instructions, Melfiora's eyes sparkle with excitement as she watches. After a few pulls, the Xanas is almost out of the water. The group continues until it is finally fully lifted from the net. Roger and Melfiora step closer to examine it, and Melfiora can't hide her awe as it's both gigantic and magnificent. Roger explains that this Xanas must be 7 or 8 years old, and because it's their spawning season, they're particularly aggressive. Melfiora realizes that the photos and textbooks don't do it justice. Its massive teeth make her instinctively think it could tear off a limb in one bite, so Roger warns her not to get too close. Roger suddenly illuminates his hand with magic, preparing to behead the Xanas. However, Melfiora points out that they should stun it first since it's a fish. She tries to wield the sword specially forged by the Galbraith blacksmith, but it proves too heavy for her to even hold properly. Though she intended to do it herself, it's impossible. Seeing this, Roger takes the sword from her, reassuring her that he will handle the dirty work, just as he promised back at their betrothal, and Melfiora agrees. As Roger steps forward, he admits he's never killed a fish before, so he asks Melfiora to guide him. She gladly complies, explaining her plan. First, she wants to blind the fish, knowing they stay still when it's dark. She covers its eyes with a cloth, and it immediately stops thrashing. Next, she instructs Roger to stab behind the eye and twist the blade. Confident that a single blow will suffice, she encourages him to go ahead, and Roger follows her directions. With precision, the blow lands exactly where she instructed. However, killing the Xanas proves harder than expected, as the creature is tough. Melfiora instructs Roger to twist the blade once the cloth is removed from its eyes, but he struggles to do so until finally blood spills and the fish dies. With the killing complete, it's now Melfiora's turn to extract the magical toxins from the creature. She lays out the magic circles drawn on oil paper and begins her ritual. As always, she starts by paying respect to the monster, offering a quiet prayer before reciting the incantations in the magical language. Slowly, both the magic circles and Melfiora herself begin to glow as the magical toxins are drawn out. Although the Xanas isn't very bloody, the extracted toxins are thick. What unsettles her most, however, is the way her hair starts to stand every time she performs the ritual. Once the ritual is complete, Melfiora hands the flask to Roger. After assessing the Xanas, she decides it's safest to remove the head, tail, and scales, wanting to learn how to do it herself so she won't trouble Roger every time she asks him to teach her. Roger laughs while tapping her head and tells her not to hold back, as he will always help her gladly, pointing out that he enjoys cooking monsters with her, and Melfiora feels the same way. Looking back on her past, she's always handled such tasks alone, but this time, Roger and his men are assisting her, which gives her joy. Melfiora instructs the men to remove the head and organs of the Xanas, prompting Roger to once again ask for her guidance. Patiently, she explains each step in detail. Though the angle is challenging, Roger raises his sword, his eyes glowing with magic, and with a single strike, he cleanly beheads the fish. Excitedly, she calls for Mullen to take a look, proudly pointing out Roger's flawless work. Mullen quickly agrees, admitting that even as a fellow man, he's always admired the Duke's swordsmanship. Roger suddenly appears behind them, curious about what they're discussing, and Melfiora admits they were praising his skill, making him flustered. Seeing his reaction, Melfiora can't help but laugh softly. As the first light of dawn breaks, Melfiora instructs the men to remove the organs next. Since both the head and organs are inedible, she asks Rogier to dispose of them. Without hesitation, he raises his hand and channels his fire magic, burning the remains. Mullen watches proudly and explains that Rogier personally developed this spell to help people safely dispose of monsters' remains. Now that the sun is fully up, it's finally time to cook. But because the kitchen inside the fort is too small, they decide to work outdoors instead. Melfiora agrees, pointing out that it will also make cleaning easier. She then asks if anyone knows how to skin a fish, explaining that the Xana's flesh is softer than most beasts, so she'll need to slice it off carefully. Ambry volunteers, saying he handles delicate furs daily and is confident he can manage. With that, Melfiora instructs Ambry to begin skinning and slicing the fish. He works carefully as he removes the thick skin and neatly portions the meat. Before long, they are left with clean, soft fish flesh. Melfiora immediately notices how well he did and praises not only Ambry, but all the men for their impressive teamwork. She even hesitates to chop the beautiful cuts, knowing how much effort Ambry put into them, but he only tells her not to worry. Mullen, clearly excited, urges her to continue, so Melfiora proceeds with her cooking plan while everyone eagerly listens. Melfiora begins by heating 2 large pots of oil, one hotter and the other cooler, planning to fry the Xanas in 2 stages. Rogier also wants to help, so Melfiora assigns him to watch over the hotter pot. She then mixes flour, water, and a blend of spices to create the batter. Once ready, they dip the chopped Xanas into the mixture before carefully placing them into the cooler pot, and when the fish turns a light golden brown, Melfiora uses a wooden ladle to lift it out. Finally, they transfer the fish into the hotter pot for a quick second fry, sealing in the flavor and crisping the surface. That's how they will achieve the perfectly cooked Xanas. After giving everyone their tasks, the group begins cooking the Xanas together. Rogier, however, looks disheartened when he presents his cooked Xanas to Melfiora, as the pieces are darker than expected. Still, Melfiora reassures him that not everyone gets it perfect on the first try and that his are definitely still edible. To lift his spirits, she playfully asks him to feed her. Rogier hesitates, insisting they look like failures, but Melfiora thinks they look delicious. With her hands sticky from cooking, she opens her mouth like a child, shocking him further. She even reminds him to blow on it first since it's fresh out of the oil. Flustered, Rogier carefully blows on the piece and feeds it to her. The moment Melfiora takes a bite, her eyes immediately light up, and she lets out a cheerful shriek as it's perfectly crispy and absolutely delicious. As Melfiora continues describing the flavor to Rogier, he suddenly gives in and eats the rest of the Xana's piece she bit from. The act completely unsettles Melfiora, but Rogier seems unfazed and simply praises how delicious it is. His attention soon turns to the perfectly cooked pieces. Melfiora insists on tasting first to ensure there's no poison, but Rogier ignores her warning and pops one into his mouth. He then offers her a piece, and the moment she takes a bite, her eyes widen as it's even more flavorful. Both the crispier ones and the softer ones turn out equally delicious, so they agree to prepare both versions to give people a choice. Rogier even calls Mullen to taste some, making the man beam with excitement. The group continues frying 2 variations of the Xanas until every last piece of meat is cooked. Melfiora thanks Rogier for all his help, but he immediately turns the concern back to her, worrying that she's been standing for too long. Melfiora only assures him that she had a wonderful time because he was with her, which makes Rogier feel accomplished. Then he reminds her that they still need to move indoors for breakfast. Melfiora agrees, explaining that she already asked the fort's chef to prepare bread and vegetables and everything has been arranged in the Great Hall. When she insists that Rogier go ahead and eat first, he tries to protest, but she calls for Mullen, who wastes no time grabbing Rogier by the arm. Rogier protests even more, but Mullen tells him that no one else will eat unless their duke starts first. As Rogier is reluctantly dragged away, Melfiora begins tidying up the area, grateful for how much effort he put in that morning. Seeing her working, Szeth and Ambry step forward to help her clean so they can all eat together. Melfiora smiles, thanking them both for their help. As thanks, Melfiora offers Szeth and Ambry a plate of oddly shaped fish meat. It turns out to be grilled fish belly. Szeth takes a bite first and Ambry follows right after. To their surprise, it's rich and savory, so Ambry remarks that it would taste even better with a bit of sour fruit juice, and Szeth recalls that such juice is often served for breakfast. With that, Melfiora urges them to hurry before it's all gone. As they head toward the Great Hall, Melfiora lightly scolds herself for being so indulgent about food, only to shrug and promise she'll be more prudent starting tomorrow. Upon entering, they're greeted by the lively atmosphere of what feels like a feast. Rogier, already seated, spots Melfiora and waves her over. Once she joins him, he tells her that after breakfast, they'll set out again and should arrive at their lands by evening. Rogier picks up a piece of the fish, wraps it in lettuce, and takes a bite. The sight intrigues Melfiora, so she imitates him. And to her surprise, the combination tastes incredibly fresh. Szeth then offers her a fruit called cabo, which is the sour fruit they mentioned earlier. Melfira has never seen one before, but she squeezes its juice onto the food and takes a bite. The tangy flavor makes her shriek in delight. It's refreshing yet easy to eat. Her reaction catches Roger's attention, and he tries the same thing despite admitting he's never eaten cabo except when drinking. The moment he bites into it, he lets out a startled yelp but quickly tries to act composed. Melfira then makes a mental note that he dislikes sour food, so she won't make the same mistake again. Still, Roger tells her that meals are always more enjoyable when he's with her. As they prepare to continue their journey, the men pack sandwiches for the trip, while the remaining Xana's meat is frozen and salted to preserve it for later. Melfira feels grateful for everyone's hard work, and before they fly, Roger reminds his men to stay alert to avoid any accidents along the way. Once they take off into the sky, Roger turns to Melfira and tells her to ready herself for the Galbraith lands. Deep inside, she feels excited knowing she's about to step into an entirely new world. As they continue soaring through the skies, Melfira grows worried about Roger, knowing he hasn't slept at all. Roger tries to reassure her by showing the cabo fruit he brought that morning, which he claims is keeping him awake during the flight. This startles Melfira since she wants him to rest, so she suggests flying with Mullen or Zeth so Roger can sleep properly. However, Roger's expression darkens at the idea. In truth, he never intended to eat the cabo fruit himself and only brought it because Melfira seemed to like it. Then he tells her not to rely on other men and only on him. His jealous reaction makes Melfira laugh, which only unsettles Roger further. As she looks at him, she can't help imagining what his life in the Galbraith lands must be like. Every Galbraith knight she has met so far clearly respects him, so she wonders how the rest of the people in his territory see him as well. Melfira becomes curious about Galbraith's lands, so she begins asking Roger about them. Roger explains that there used to be 30 cities and towns, but after the Great Famine that happened 17 years ago, only 12 settlements remain. In Galbraith, they call that famine the Cataclysm because it is the same period when the previous duke passed away unexpectedly and Roger was chosen to succeed him. Melfira immediately wonders how a duke could die during a famine, but Roger clarifies that at that time an unprecedented number of monsters emerged from the Urzani woods. They couldn't call them fast enough, so their magic power swelled, and many blood-mad creatures flooded into Galbraith. Melfira has never heard this story before, so Roger explains that it's because the last duke fulfilled his duty and lost countless knights to stop the threat, ensuring that no other nations had to suffer from what happened. Even when the king ordered reinforcements from other nations, the catastrophe had struck everyone so severely that most had no knights to spare anymore. Besides, the former duke had vowed to give his life for their lands, as it was a duty someone had to carry on. In the present, Roger and his knights are the ones who inherited that vow. It is the king's command, but it's also the weight that comes with bearing the Galbraith name. They stake their lives to protect the kingdom and swear that they will never allow a second cataclysm after losing far too many people in that battle. Hearing this, Melfira wants to comfort Roger but hesitates. She realizes that Roger has always been prepared to die, and the image of her mother flashes in her mind. She cannot allow something like that to happen again. She can't believe that he has accepted such a fate so easily, and she ends up scolding him for thinking that way. Raising her voice, she pleads with him not to speak about losing his life so casually. In that moment, she remembers her mother and how she died, as if she had long accepted her fate. Melfira refuses to let something like that happen again, which is why she stayed devoted to her research, promising herself she would continue studying so no one would have to suffer the same way. Seeing how distressed she is, Roger leans in and reassures her that he does value his life. So Melfira tells him she's there for him, that fate brought them together so she can help him. Even if she isn't in any position to make an oath in his place, she clasps his hand and promises that her magic circle will serve him well. Melfira is determined to protect him and his people, for as long as he allows her to live her life at his side. Roger loves the idea of living his life with her, but he can't bear exposing her to danger, so he vows to protect her, and Melfira wants the same thing. Their methods may differ, yet both of them want to protect each other. Melfira wants to protect him no matter what happens, but Roger simply cannot allow her to get hurt. Her words are full of promise, yet he doesn't know if he could accept them, and the uncertainty makes Melfira tear up even though she tries to hide it. Roger admits that even if it pains him to see her sad, it's something he expected. Then Roger begins to share his own story, and she tells him to pour everything out to her, no matter how big or small. For a long time, Roger wondered how Melfira would react if she learned everything about him. Even though they're already engaged, he's been afraid of disappointing her. But now he wants her to know every part of him so she can understand who he is. There, Roger reveals that he was actually born as the second son of the previous king. Back then, Roger and Maxim lived together in the castle, and compared to him, Maxim carried the same golden hair and deep purple eyes as their father, who was the seventh monarch known for his wisdom, even called the second coming of the sage. Roger, however, caused a stir throughout the kingdom because of his eyes, which could store magic. He had always looked up to his older brother since tutors and nurses often praised Maxim as clever. Rogier, on the other hand, felt embarrassed as he would lose control of his magic and accidentally cause destruction in the castle from time to time. Even so, Maxim always comforted him. Back then, he would lose control of his powers and end up destroying the castle walls before collapsing. Each time it happened, he suffered severe fevers afterwards, so Melfiora reminds him that losing control can harm him and even kill him if it worsens. Rogier reassures her that he's stronger now, but deep down he can tell that her worries come from someone she lost to the same condition. He assumes it must be her mother, yet he chooses to wait until she's ready to share it herself. When Rogier learned to withstand the magic inside him, the only place that would take him was the Knights, since officials and servants were terrified of him. That was where he met Chaos, who was always critical of him. And yet he was also the first knight to swear loyalty to him. Chaos could have followed in his father's path and joined the royal guards, yet when Rogier was sent to Galbraith, Chaos went with him instead. Hearing this makes Melfiora genuinely happy, so Rogier pulls her closer into a hug and quietly asks if she wants to hear the rest, warning her that the next part isn't as pleasant. Melfiora immediately guesses he means the Great Famine, but she hesitates, knowing it is one of the kingdom's secrets. Rogier, however, assures her that it's alright since their engagement has already been approved by the king. Even he still finds that surprising since he never intended to marry anyone until he met her. To prevent any disputes, the former king appointed Rogier as the next Duke of Galbraith, while his brother inherited the throne. At that time, the kingdom was already weakened by drought and famine, and the nobles were on the brink of rebellion, so they had no other choice. However, some nobles wanted to name Rogier the crown prince and send him across nations to expand their territory under a magically powerful ruler. Because of this, an internal conflict broke out between the factions that supported and opposed him, dragging Rogier into the center of it all. During the battle, Chaos' father was killed, and Rogier happened to overhear the servants whispering about food shortages and the appearance of monsters. Hearing that, Rogier felt compelled to act, so he immediately ran to his brother and told Maxim that he would become the Duke of Galbraith so Maxim could take the throne, explaining that he didn't want a tragedy like this to strike again. With that, Maxim could only hug him, moved that Rogier was thinking of such things at such a young age. Although it pained him, Maxim accepted the path laid out for them. He marched straight into the courtroom where the nobles gathered and announced that he would be the next king, while Rogier would serve as the new Duke of Galbraith. With that, Maxim's reign began, and Rogier took on the role of a knight. Years later, Rogier proposed a new plan to his brother as he didn't want the knights to exist solely for slaying monsters. Maxim agreed, granting knights a post in the royal guards after 5 years of service. This decision delighted Rogier since it would strengthen the kingdom's forces as well. Chaos then revealed that they were also exploring other uses for the monsters they hunted, as many of them were valuable sources of rare materials. So he suggested that the crown buy anything usable. To their surprise, Maxim accepted the proposal immediately, and they sealed the agreement. Although Rogier believes Maxim approved the plan simply because they are brothers, Melfiora finds it brilliant, especially since Galbraith's lands are overflowing with monsters the knights have to exterminate regularly. Rogier agrees as well, knowing this abundance is exactly why he continues hunting to protect his kingdom. He declares that he is preparing himself, because if another cataclysm ever arises, he will be ready to lay down his life. However, Melfiora stops him mid-sentence, insisting that they should focus on preventing another cataclysm from occurring instead. Rogier never imagined that might be possible, but Melfiora insists the monsters are increasing and someone has to put an end to it. She is clearly distressed by how willing Rogier is to sacrifice himself, so she wants to complete her research on extracting magic from living creatures, believing it can prevent the monsters from going mad and attacking people, and he might not have to risk his life anymore. Hearing this, Rogier can't help but kiss Melfiora on the forehead, causing her to turn red with embarrassment. She panics, but Rogier simply laughs. Melfiora feels flustered, so Rogier adds that he is seriously considering living his life with her now, and Melfiora can only cover her face in embarrassment. Soon they pass over a vast forest with a river cutting through it. Rogier explains that they're getting close and that what she's seen is actually the Urzini forest. It's so enormous that even he can get lost in it without a map. Melfiora is familiar with it, as the forest is infamous for being infested with monsters, yet it's also rich with magical ores. Because of that, the land and air are overflowing with magic and only monsters can survive there. Beside the forest runs the Galbraith River, the largest in their territory. It splits into 3 branches, and Rogier tells her that this is why he finds it special. He also points toward the snowmole from the Galbraith Range, explaining how the water flows underground before resurfacing. Melfiora realizes just how abundant their water supply should be, yet even all of that dried up 17 years ago. This makes her think that if such water could disappear, her own homeland would never have survived a famine that severe. She wants to ask Rogier how a drought like that could occur, but Rogier cuts in first, warning that her sitting position is dangerous, prompting her to turn around. At that moment, Rogier receives a message from his men. A flock of fawns is approaching from behind. When they look back, A massive swarm of bird-like monsters is closing in, their numbers rising from 200 to 800, so Relvier immediately moves to the front. Eric and Zeth also volunteer to join him, and the three arrange themselves and prepare. Malfira feels the danger as there are now at least 600 Forns speeding toward them. Roger tells the knights to close their formation as tightly as they can and hands Malfira a pair of air goggles, telling her that this is what life in Galbraith is like. Malfira grows curious, so Roger explains that Forns use acceleration magic to hunt in flocks, though it's rare for them to attack groups of travelers. As fascinated as she's watching them, she also doesn't want to be eaten by them. When the monsters begin closing in, Roger tells her to brace herself. He releases his power, and their flight suddenly surges forward. Malfira immediately recognizes it as acceleration magic, but within seconds, they're flying so low that she realizes they're about to crash into the ground. Good thing Roger accelerates just in time for them to avoid crashing. Malfira is so scared that she tries to divert her thoughts by wondering if these monsters are carnivores and starts imagining whether their meat would yield tasty juices, even thinking about all the different dishes she could make from them. However, her thoughts are cut off by their screeching, making her realize these creatures could eat them long before she ever can. The birds continue to pursue them even as Roger speeds up. Roger initially plans to take the rear, but with Malfira riding with him, he switches to a fence. His knights react immediately, using magic to drive the birds away, while Roger warns Malfira that they need even more speed. Roger's eyes light up again as his magic wells up, and they surge faster than before. The wind becomes so cold and sharp that Malfira has to bow her head. She assumes Roger has stopped his shielding spell so he can focus on accelerating. The men keep firing at the birds, but their accuracy drops with the growing distance and speed. Worse, the creatures are far too many. These monsters shouldn't even be chasing them at all, so the knights are convinced something is off. Seth suggests landing at a nearby fort to confront them, but Roger refuses. He insists they push toward the defense line instead. At his words, Malfira realizes they're avoiding engagement because of her. The dragons are also forced to carry her belongings, so she feels guilty about it. Then Malfira suddenly gets an idea. Her bags are packed and could easily explode if torn open. These will make perfect distractions if thrown toward the birds. She calls out her plan to Roger, but he immediately refuses. Instead, he tells her to stop talking before she bites her tongue at their speed. When she demands to be put down so they can engage, Roger refuses that as well. Instead, he pulls her close and whispers that there are knights waiting at the defense line, so she only needs to endure a little longer. Roger's reassuring smile calms her, yet she knows his magic isn't limitless. She forces herself to think of another way to help, but with their targets constantly moving, attaching the paper-based magic circles to them is nearly impossible. Offensive spells aren't her specialty either, so she needs to think of something else. That's when she remembers the cloudy quartz in her bag. She could use it to drain the bird's magic, but it's full of the Xanaz's blood. Her thoughts then drift back to Roger's warning about magical energy being powerful enough to destroy nations. Even so, a single quartz wouldn't be enough to take down the entire flock if she simply threw it. Then she recalls the fire spell Roger showed her. With that idea, Malfira grabs her ink as the swarm of monster birds closes in. She begins scribbling directly onto the cloudy quartz, drawing symbols of fire and explosives. She also writes Roger's name as part of it, though she struggles to remember his full name. At that moment, Malfira asks for Roger's full name, leaving him confused about why she would ask about it now. But she ignores his reaction and continues her work, as she knows a spell becomes more potent when the caster's name is inscribed within it. The last part of it should make use of blood, but licking it will be enough for now. So she presents the cloudy quartz to Roger and hurriedly tells him to lick it. Roger is stunned when he realizes she's using the Xanaz's stored magical energy combined with ancient script. Malfira urges him to activate it immediately so they can use it against the birds, but instead, Roger unexpectedly laughs, reading every symbol she scribbled. He gently pats her head, draws his sword, and adds a drop of his own blood to the quartz, and he thanks Malfira for her help. Roger begins activating his fire magic, and the quartz glows. He asks Malfira if she truly came up with the solution on her own, but she is too distracted by the small wound on his hand, promising she'll treat it afterward. Roger leans in, telling her he'll finish this quickly. Then he calls out orders to his men, commanding them to ascend high into the sky. Each knight is assigned a position, waiting for his signal. However, Roger instructs Mullen to stay behind. As the flock draws near once more, Roger tells him that he will serve as the decoy to break through the monsters using his acceleration spell. Mullen deems himself ready to be sacrificed, but Roger only smirks, assuring him he won't die. Seeing Mullen's hesitation, Roger explains his plan to throw the magical energy into the flock, and once Mullen completes his task, he must fly as far from them as possible. With that, he orders the others to ascend while he and Mullen remain. Mullen then faces back, charging straight toward the birds. As the birds swarm toward Mullen, Roger pours even more of his magic into the quartz to heighten its force. Only when Mullen breaks through the flock and ascends above them does Rogier hurl the quartz into them. It flies straight into a bird's open beak, and Melfiora anxiously thinks it failed, but Rogier remains calm while telling her to close her eyes. Seconds later, the monster releases a piercing scream before erupting in a brilliant explosion. The heat is overwhelming, but Rogier says this is only the beginning. Every spell she scribbled on that quartz is about to activate, which shocks her. Rogier, however, only laughs, teasing that she'll do just fine in Galbraith at this rate. Creating such a magic circle should be impossible, so Rogier promises it will be their little secret. Just then, the chain of explosions erupts, followed by one final blast so powerful that it leaves even the knights stunned. Rogier, however, only laughs in amazement at the sheer force of it. Mullen also approaches, shouting about how spectacular the blast was. Melfiora eagerly waves at him, but before they can speak further, another explosion rumbles through the air. Melfiora can't help thinking about those poor birds that are most likely burned already after all that fire. As they resume their flight, Melfiora still can't believe what she's done. Yet Rogier simply praises her quick thinking, reminding her that it was what saved them all. She never imagined magical energy could be used as a weapon, as her interests have always leaned more toward cooking and eating monster meat alone. But now she finally understands just how dangerous it can be. That thought prompts Melfiora to quietly ask Rogier if he thinks her research is taboo. Rogier immediately reassures her that, in his lands, no one would rebuke her for it and she's free to devote herself to her craft. He also adds that magical energy isn't used solely for weapons. In fact, it can be used as fuel for ovens, just like she has always done back home, assuring her that there's nothing to worry about. They can even test it in Galbraith, where people typically use flint or magic to start fires. Besides, the region endures long winters, so the light produced by magical energy would be incredibly helpful. Hearing this, Melfiora brightens and suggests dividing the energy into small portions to distribute to the people. Rogier assures her that they would be delighted to receive it, and the idea that her research could ease people's lives puts her heart at ease. Looking back, no one in Martelraid ever cared about her research, so everything she produced needed to be disposed of or released naturally. Only now does she truly understand that monsters are truly gold mines. She feels a surge of happiness as Rogier not only acknowledges her research, but also shows her a new path forward. She expresses her gratitude, but Rogier returns the credit, insisting it was she who saved them all from the monsters. Still, she knows a spell's effect depends largely on its caster, and it wouldn't have activated so powerfully without Rogier. Next time, though, she promises to try something smaller. Rogier then tells Melfiora that they can hunt monsters together. Hearing those words feels like music to her ears, and she immediately imagines all the adventures they could have as Rogier continues describing the seasonal creatures that appear in the Urzini forests, making her even more excited. She chatters nonstop about it until a frantic voice suddenly cuts into their conversation. Chaos arrives riding the Blaze Eagle, clearly alarmed after hearing the explosions earlier. Melfiora can hardly believe the sight of Blaze Eagle up close. Though Chaos came expecting to rescue Rogier, Rogier proudly tells him that he and Melfiora already handled the threat. Chaos is stunned to hear Melfiora was involved, but when the realization hits him, he understands that they were the source of the explosions and not the enemy. Chaos immediately begins lecturing Rogier for causing such explosions while Melfiora was with him. Rogier, however, puts on a proud expression to make Chaos panic even more. What Chaos doesn't know is that Melfiora was actually the one who created the explosions. Rogier then argues that the monstrous birds were acting strangely, but Chaos insists the situation was still inappropriate and even assumes Rogier's acceleration spell must have frightened her. Rogier only pouts under the scolding, so Melfiora steps in to defend him, assuring him she's completely fine. She is just about to confess about the spell when the surrounding knights suddenly start commenting on how lovely she is. As more knights gather around, her face turns bright red from embarrassment, so Rogier immediately pulls his cape around her and scolds every knight who dares to stare. Soon they pass by a small civilized town, and Melfiora assumes it must be where Rogier lives. True enough, he confirms that he resides in the central structure, even telling her she may choose any room she likes as the place is quite large. However, Melfiora quickly notices that the building is actually a fortress and not a castle as it appears to be. Rogier is impressed she caught that detail and explains that one of their dukes from generations ago constructed it specifically for combat. Over the years, it evolved into its current form. The stronghold is called Midleg, serving as their primary defense against monsters. Melfiora is startled, wondering how creatures from the Urzini woods managed to reach this far, so Rogier clarifies that it only happens occasionally as some monsters wander into the grasslands and prey on wagons traveling along the trade routes. Because of that, their battles aren't as bad as they used to be anymore. Melfiora also notices the solid walls surrounding it, which remind her of her homeland, which has nothing like it. Rogier explains that the Urzini woods used to be much closer, but he cut back their defense line. People began settling there because the Duke had made it a safe refuge, and over time, the fear of monsters shaped the entire place. Additionally, the survivors of the cataclysm also gathered there 17 years ago. Looking down, Melfira sees a large, scorched stretch of land which she assumes was left by the magic the Duke used to protect his people. Roger notices the concern on her face and assures her that their living conditions are much better now, so she has nothing to worry about. As they near landing, Mullen catches up and casually chats with Melfira, which makes Roger a bit jealous. With that, he orders him to go ahead and instruct the knights to open the military gates. Mullen follows and the gates begin to rise. Chaos enters first, so Roger tells him to take Melfira's belongings inside before proceeding through the gate. Roger explains that a magical barrier still surrounds the town, so they must enter from below. Melfira is stunned, so Roger adds that the barrier consumes a large amount of magical energy and can't be maintained continuously. It must have received news about the bird attack earlier, which is why the barrier is active now. Then light spills over their faces as they finally arrive in town. Melfira scans the surroundings, seeing people waving up at them, and she waves back. Now she has finally reached the place Roger protects, Midlake. Melfira is amazed by what she finds inside the fortress with farms, livestock, and bustling activity everywhere. At first glance, it looks like any ordinary fortress, but on a closer look, it's actually a proper city. As she observes the place, she notices that the Galbraith lands don't have any area dedicated to animism. So Roger explains that there are no animists here, but even so, eating monsters is considered taboo regardless of one's beliefs. The thought saddens Melfira, but Roger adds that the knights are an exception since many of them have eaten monster meat before, though the results were often unpleasant, so most are hesitant to try again. Melfira, however, feels her excitement growing. Just imagining the monsters she might encounter makes her eager to taste them all. Once they land, Roger asks Melfira to check her belongings, so she opens her luggage only to suddenly feel like someone is staring at her. When she glances up, she's startled to see the dragon's large eye fixed on her. For a moment, she wonders if it's watching her on purpose, but when she looks behind her, she realizes it's actually looking at the packed monster meat Roger is holding. Assuming the dragon wants a taste, Melfira asks Roger to feed it some of the monster meat, but Roger hesitates. It is the delicious royal moodle meat after all. But when he looks at his dragon, its eyes are shining, and its expression is almost pleading. With that, he gives in and offers the meat. As they cross the bridge leading to Roger's castle, Melfira peers over them and notices the Bacta fish gliding through the water below. They aren't monsters like the Xanas, but she still can't help but wonder if they taste delicious. Then something red in the water catches her attention. She leans closer in confusion until she realizes the red is only beneath her. With a jolt, she recognizes it as the reflection of her own hair, and she immediately screams in panic. She remembers she hadn't tied it properly before their flight, and after that chaotic dragon ride, her ribbon must have come loose entirely. Melfira freezes, mortified that she's been walking around looking so unkempt. Wild thoughts rush through her head, afraid that she might get jailed for having such an appearance. Although she tries her best to contain it, simply combing it with her fingers does nothing. With no other choice, she reluctantly turns to Roger and quietly tells him there is something she needs to say. Roger immediately tends to her, but to Melfira's surprise, he doesn't seem to notice how chaotic her hair actually is. For a moment, she wonders if it might not be as bad as she thought, yet she quickly forces the idea away, telling herself that as Roger's fiancée, she must remain groomed at all times. However, Roger misunderstands the situation and assumes Melfira is simply curious about the Bacta. He explains that they're especially delicious when stewed, and Melfira is easily distracted, blurting out that she has never eaten one before. Delighted, Roger invites her to try some, and she agrees. Only then does she realize that the Bacta isn't her worry in the first place. Gathering her courage, Melfira admits that she wants to look presentable before meeting anyone in the castle, so she wonders if there's a place where she can fix herself. Roger instantly panics, apologizing over and over. He curses himself for being so inconsiderate, especially after listening to Chaos lecturing earlier. In a panic, Roger calls Mullen and announces they have an emergency. Melfira thinks it isn't that serious, but Roger immediately orders Mullen to summon the Blanche Court. Mullen stares at him in confusion, but after seeing Roger's frantic expression, he rushes off to gather them at once. Roger apologizes to Melfira for not being more accommodating, explaining that the castle hasn't had any chambermaids as it has only been the men living there for a long time. Melfira quietly realizes the former duke's wife must never have lived there, and that she should have asked about these things instead of getting distracted by monsters. Seeing her troubled expression, Roger panics again and hurriedly explains that they haven't had a duchess in 4 generations. To his surprise, Melfira suddenly laughs. She knows she shouldn't, but she can't help herself, so Roger ends up smiling along with her as well. When the Blanche Court arrives, Roger introduces them to Melfira, reminding them to treat her with the same respect they give him. The first woman introduces herself as Blanche the Captain. She addresses Melfira as Princess, and Melfira can't help but admire her for being handsome, even as a woman. As they continue talking, the women begin debating how Melfiora should be addressed. They agree to call her Madam, but Blanche argues that such a young woman deserves the title Princess. After that, Melfiora introduces herself and asks them to simply call her by her first name, even though they still insist on calling her Princess. Following that, Natalie steps forward and introduces herself as the vice captain of the court, followed by the youngest member, Lillian, who is the daughter of a baronet. Once they are done, Rogier immediately instructs Blanche to help Melfiora recover, since she has just finished her first flight. Blanche accepts, but Melfiora hesitates, wondering when she will be meeting everyone else. Rogier suggests that dinner would be the perfect time. Satisfied, Melfiora excuses herself, but before she can leave, Rogier gently removes her glove and kisses it in front of everyone. The gesture flusters her, making her feel awkward. Afterward, he shows her where his room is, encouraging her to come to him anytime. Then at last, Natalie calls Melfiora into her own room. Meanwhile, Mullen teases Rogier about his earlier actions, even threatening to tell Chaos everything, which drives Rogier into a flustered rage. As Melfiora enters the room, she is immediately struck by how magnificent it is. Just as she is about to step inside, she hesitates, noticing her boots and worrying that they might dirty the beautiful carpet. Blanche immediately understands the situation and lifts Melfiora into a chair. The gesture leaves Melfiora completely flustered, and when Blanche casually remarks that she's as light as a kitten, Melfiora blushes even harder. Her embarrassment deepens when Blanche kneels in front of her to remove her boots, prompting Melfiora to protest in panic, as she cannot handle being close to someone so handsome. Natalie steps forward next, asking if Melfiora prefers any particular confections, but Melfiora declines the offer. To her surprise, Blanche refuses to accept her refusal. She explains that serving Melfiora is their privilege. With that, Blanche kneels once more, and her companions immediately follow in unison. Blanche then draws a sword, presenting it to Melfiora and asking her to honor them as her knights. Melfiora reaches for the weapon, but pauses when she notices the seal engraved on it. She recognizes the same seal on the sword Rogier wielded when he came to her rescue. Melfiora explains that since they were chosen by the Duke, that is enough reason for her to trust them. However, they are still strangers to her, just as she is a stranger to them. She closes the sword's case again, telling them that a knight's blade is their life, and they shouldn't entrust it to someone they have only just met. With that, she returns the sword, and Blanche reluctantly accepts it back. She then mentions the rumors surrounding her and insists that she made a promise to the Duke. During her journey here, she realized what she must accomplish for Galbraith. She tells them she cannot accept their blades, yet not until the people acknowledge her as their lady. Only then will she be worthy of their swords. The three women watch her closely before rising. With that, they vow to do their best to become knights worthy of serving her as well. They exchange thanks, and just as they settle, Melfiora asks one last question. She asks whether the swords they carry were crafted by the same smith who forged the Duke's blade. Blanche is confused at first, but she eventually confirms it is indeed crafted by the smithy in Midleague. Hearing this, Melfiora expresses her desire to have one as well, as she eagerly asks if Blanche could introduce her to this smithy. Blanche hesitates, but Melfiora remains persistent. Her eyes shine with excitement, leaving Blanche with no choice but to provide her with the information she needs. Afterward, Blanche volunteers to brush Melfiora's hair. However, the brush gets stuck immediately, and her hair only becomes even more frizzy. Embarrassed, Blanche admits she can't seem to manage the task. She apologizes and takes all the blame, but Melfiora simply turns to her and asks if she can make her hair fluffy instead. Blanche doesn't understand at first, so Melfiora explains that Rogier likes it when her hair looks that way. Blanche can't help but let out a small laugh at Rogier's preference, yet she takes the request and makes it her mission to untangle Melfiora's hair and fluff it just the way Rogier loves. Melfiora feels ashamed for asking a knight to do her hair, but Blanche reassures her, saying she used to do her daughter's hair when she was little. Melfiora happily listens until Blanche's words sink in. She freezes, realizing that Blanche is actually married, and hurriedly asks if what she heard was right, and Blanche confirms it, saying she has a son and a daughter. Melfiora is still in shock when Blanche continues combing her hair and goes on to share that her daughter is a lot like her, determined to become a knight. Melfiora finds that idea wonderful, and Blanche agrees, but also admits that becoming a Galbraith knight comes with hardships as well. Then she asks Melfiora about why she wants to hold a blade at all. To her surprise, Melfiora answers that she wants to wield a blade to slay monsters. Blanche is immediately stunned, especially when Melfiora confirms that it's because she butchers them for consumption. Melfiora explains that her relationship with Rogier actually began because he wanted to try her monster meat dishes as well. Then she turns to Natalie and asks her to unpack the tools in her luggage. When the case is opened, it reveals the different kinds of tools she uses. Natalie even inspects one and notices how worn out it already is. Melfiora explains that she uses it specifically for cleaving through bones. Lillian, wide-eyed, asks if it's really true that Melfiora eats monsters, prompting Natalie to panic and cover the girl's mouth, but Melfiora only laughs and confirms it's true before launching into the story of how she first started eating them. Lillian listens with fascination, complaining afterward that everyone refuses to let her try monster meat because terrible things might happen, and the knights always leave her behind during expeditions. Her grievance sparks irritation in Blanche, but Melfiora simply says she can serve her monster meat if Rogier allows it. Lillian grows increasingly curious about the taste of monster meat, so Blanche abruptly dismisses her. This causes Lillian to sulk, but eventually she obeys. Before she can leave, Melfiora calls out and asks her age, so Lillian replies that she is 15. Melfiora is startled, asking if she's already considered an adult, so Lillian explains that in Galbraith, 17 is the legal age, but she has been knighted, giving her certain privileges. Melfiora soon understands that Lillian is in that difficult stage. She knows exactly what that feels like, so she invites her to cook monster meat together and taste it herself. Blanche and Natalie both freeze in shock, so Melfiora adds that they should try it too. As Melfiora thinks about which monsters they could try, Lillian eagerly suggests Screamwood. She recalls that Rogier said it was sour, but Mullen fondly described it as rich, sweet, and incredibly juicy. He did develop a fever afterward, but she still wants to try it. The description sparks Melfiora's curiosity, and she becomes just as excited to try it, despite never having tasted it before. Her sudden enthusiasm startles both Blanche and Natalie, while Lillian bursts into delighted laughter. As Rogier prepares himself, Mullen is visibly uneasy, so Rogier asks what's wrong. Mullen explains that Melfiora's seal chamber and Rogier's tear chamber are connected by an interior door. He wonders if this doesn't bother Rogier, but Rogier calmly replies that he has no ulterior motives, then shifts the conversation to the birds they encountered earlier. Rogier notes how unusual the flock's behavior was and that the much larger bird appeared to be their leader. Mullen adds that when he charged directly into them, they didn't avoid him at all, meaning they weren't even afraid of glacial dragons. With that, Rogier suggests they may have been mad, and Mullen agrees. On top of that, the enormous bird managed to swallow the flask thrown at it. Rogier theorizes that the accumulated magical toxins drove the creature insane, causing it to go berserk and lead the rest of the flock to attack. It's the only plausible explanation they have. Then Mullen asks when Rogier developed such a terrifying spell that almost made Mullen think he was going to die. Rogier avoids answering directly, but deep down he knows the spell was Melfiora's idea and he merely activated it. Internally, though, he curses Mullen for calling her spell horrible. Rogier understands that Melfiora's research has dangerous byproducts that could be weaponized to destroy nations, but she has done nothing wrong. Still, he knows there are not a lot of people capable of making a magic circle, so he needs trustworthy people around her, someone like Mullen. With that in mind, Rogier steps closer and examines Mullen carefully. Mullen stiffens, but Rogier calmly tells him they will need to talk about the spell. Just then, Chaos bursts into the room, prompting Rogier to draw his sword and point it at him, but Chaos simply states he wants to learn about the spell as well. Both Chaos and Mullen freeze for a moment until Chaos asks why Rogier is pulling a sword on him. Rogier defends himself, insisting he was startled because Chaos entered through the hidden door that's meant strictly for emergencies. So Chaos fires back that Rogier himself is the emergency. It turns out he is furious that Rogier already showed Melfiora the seal chamber. He explains he even used an acceleration spell to arrive early just so he could greet her at the front doors, so Rogier apologizes, explaining she might have needed to freshen up, but that only enrages Chaos further, especially since he brought chambermaids for that very purpose. Behind him stand Mrs. Laforgue, Mrs. Jordan, and Mrs. Suru, all prepared to welcome Melfiora. Chaos then demands to know if Rogier left her alone in the seal chamber, scolding him for failing to be more attentive toward her. However, Rogier proudly explains that he left Melfiora with the Blanche Court, her personal guards, and for the first time, Chaos actually commends Rogier's decision. He then turns to the chambermaids and instructs them to wait a little longer, since Melfiora is still meeting with the Blanche Court. The three women understand it cheerfully and decide they'll go enjoy some tea while they wait. Once they leave, Rogier immediately scolds Chaos for making his own mother, Mrs. Laforgue, a chambermaid. So Chaos insists he trusts no one else as much, and since she has experience caring for children, he believes she is perfect for looking after Melfiora. Rogier eventually finds this sensible. Mullen then questions why his own sister is present, given that she's merely a baker, but Rogier concludes that Mrs. Suru is impressively bold, so Mullen reluctantly agrees. Mrs. Jordan, meanwhile, is the wife of a Galbraithan knight. Chaos assures them this arrangement is temporary, and that he intends to hire others in the future. While Rogier has no complaints about this, he admits Chaos being so prepared for everything frightens him slightly. After their discussion, Chaos locks the door and creates a square barrier that encloses them inside. He wants to know more about the spell. Even though Chaos already understands the limitless power Rogier possesses, that spell is extreme. So he begins scolding him harshly. Roger pauses before asking whether the explosion was noticeable, and Mullen has no idea, though he is certain it was massive. Chaos adds that the birds were shredded into pieces after Malfeura's spell, sending Mullen into panic as he realizes it was actually Malfeura who caused what he called a horrible explosion. Roger explains that she was desperate to save him, so she used the Xanaz's magical energy to stop them. She inscribed every spell she could think of into the flask before handing it to Roger, who merely activated it. Mullen can hardly believe Malfeura is capable of something so advanced, but Roger proudly declares that she is a genius. Still, he understands Mullen's shock, as most modern spells are just simplified incantations, while ancient spells are wisdom bestowed upon chosen individuals by ancient spirits, and now such power is rarely witnessed. Malfeura, however, is entirely self-taught, yet she managed to construct a functional magic circle in that flask, which is incredible. Roger then turns to Chaos and asks about Malfeura's research materials, and Chaos confirms he handled them carefully and even placed extra seals on the flasks. Roger finds this reassuring, noting that magical energy has valuable uses. Finally, Roger turns to Mullen and instructs him not to say a word about the situation until everything is resolved, and Mullen agrees, though his confusion lingers. He asks why Roger would entrust him with such information, and Roger explains that he wants Mullen to join the Blanche Court in guarding Malfeura. Aside from his duties, Roger wants him to take responsibility for protecting her as well. Mullen believes Midleague is already a safe place, but Roger remains unconvinced, pointing out how many people are present there. He even arranged a secluded area to serve as her research laboratory to ensure nothing can harm her. Roger emphasizes that he wants Malfeura to continue her research, as it may be beneficial to them all, so he wants Mullen to protect her, and Mullen accepts the responsibility wholeheartedly. After that, the square barrier disappears, and Roger reflects on the possibility of Malfeura's research falling into the wrong hands, so he must warn her and do everything to protect her. Suddenly, Chaos draws his sword as he approaches Roger. Roger is stunned by the intensity in Chaos' eyes as he steps closer and asks what they ate during his absence. Then Chaos swings his sword, forcing Roger to shield himself. It turns out Chaos is furious that they ate Malfeura's cooked Xana's without him. Chaos then turns to Mullen, who is just as guilty. Enraged that they enjoyed such delicious monsters without him, they all lunge into a childish sword fight until a knight suddenly enters. Roger finds out that the men they left behind saw some of the monster birds go mad. Roger immediately tells Malfeura of the situation, and Chaos explains that such incidents are normal in Galbraith. While Roger dislikes leaving Malfeura alone on her first day, he must settle the matter before the mad birds begin attacking the villages and people. With that, he tells Malfeura to wait for him and promises that he will return as soon as the threat is contained. Malfeura complies, and Roger immediately teases her, telling her to call him by his name. The request makes Malfeura blush, and she accuses him of embarrassing her in front of everyone. But Roger simply laughs, reminding her that a main duty of a duchess is to appreciate and soothe the duke. With that, he embraces her, telling her not to scold him anymore, as it is her cuteness that comforts him. The two share a precious moment, so intimate that Natalie has to cover Lillian's eyes. Roger continues sweet-talking Malfeura as his farewell with such affection that even Chaos and Mullen find it unbearable. Before leaving, Roger suggests taking some of the monster birds home for her to cook, which makes Malfeura wonder if he is subtly asserting that he likes monster meat in front of his knights, as he wants them to better accept her research. Then Roger proceeds to ask if there is any particular monster Malfeura is interested in so he can hunt some while they're at it. Malfeura immediately thinks of something but avoids requesting anything major. Then she remembers the Screamwood fruit, and Lillian beams with joy while the others watch in shock. Malfeura recalls everything Lillian had said about the fruit. While Roger cannot stand its terrible odor, Mullen, in contrast, insists it is sweeter than nectar. He confirms that the fruit is indeed delicious, though perhaps overripe as it has turned black. He also remembers eating too much of it, that it led him to a terrible fate. So Malfeura wonders how Roger and Mullen could have such different experiences with the same fruit. Malfeura then reminds Roger that her request need not be a priority, as his safety always comes first. Still, he swears he will bring some for her. With that, he instructs Chaos and Mullen to prepare for departure before sundown. Yet before leaving, he pulls Malfeura into one last hug, calling it her advance payment. Roger instructs Malfeura that her research materials are placed in a room and tells the Blanche Court to show it to her later. As Roger waves goodbye, Malfeura can only silently wish for his well-being. The next day, Malfeura is greeted by Blanche, though she clearly did not get much sleep given her haggard appearance. Malfeura cannot stop overthinking about Roger, knowing he is confronting the same birds that attacked them yesterday, which are quite hard to defeat. For a moment, she wishes she had given him another flask, but the only one left contains the Royal Moodle's magical energy, which is strong enough to affect even the Duke and his knights. Frustrated that all she can do is wait, Blanche reassures Melfiora that Rogier will return soon and suggests they have breakfast first, so Melfiora agrees. Blanche also brings Melfiora to the room Rogier mentioned yesterday. It will serve as her research lab, and Melfiora quickly takes a peek inside. The space is huge, with additional materials beyond her own. She examines them and discovers intriguing documents, though for some reason she feels uninterested in them right now. The Blanche Court quietly watch as she roams the room. Ultimately, the Duke does not return that day. As the days pass, Melfiora tries to keep herself occupied by doing stuff with her guards while waiting for Rogier's return. 3 days later, she sits in her research laboratory when an announcement declares the Duke's return, and her expression immediately changes. Melfiora rushes to meet Rogier, who greets her with arms wide open. They embrace tightly, and Melfiora nearly tears up upon seeing him safe. Rogier apologizes for taking so long to return, but this hardly matters to Melfiora. Rogier reveals he brought Melfiora the screamwood fruits she requested, and she immediately lights up, but Rogier needs a nap first, so he leans on her shoulder and slowly slumps until they reach the floor. In her room, Melfiora places the screamwood fruits at the center of her magic circle. According to the encyclopedia, the fruit is supposed to be red with a terrible odor, which they confirm by covering their noses. She decides to leave the red one outside for now and begins the ritual with the black fruit, extracting all of its magical energy into a flask. The Blanche Court watch in surprise, filled with questions, but Melfiora cannot entertain them as she is completely absorbed in the ritual. Melfiora soon realizes that extracting magical energy from the screamwood fruit is difficult, as tree monsters don't truly die unless they wither completely or burn to ashes. Their fruits cannot be eaten either, so drawing energy while the tree is still alive is nearly impossible. Once Melfiora finishes the ritual, the Blanche Court applaud in amazement. They inspect the black fruit closely and notice it smells surprisingly fragrant now that it has no magical energy anymore. Even Blanche admits that the one she had previously eaten had a terrible odor, though it was not dark in color. The black fruit looks less appetizing than the red one, yet its aroma is so enticing that they already feel tempted to take a bite. Once the ritual is complete, Lillian asks if the screamwood is ready, but there is still one thing left to do. Melfiora tells her the magical energy is stored in the seeds, so the outer skin must be removed before the energy seeps out. After that, they will measure the magic contained within using the device she is holding. Melfiora tries to pierce the fruit with the device, but the shell proves too hard. Lillian volunteers to help and attempts to cut through it with a knife, but the blade slips across the surface. Blanche steps in and explains that she should use the heel of the knife first. She demonstrates the proper technique, casually mentioning that they often go camping and cook for themselves, and that if Lillian plans to join expeditions, she will need to learn these skills as well. Following Blanche's instructions, Lillian presses harder until the flesh of the fruit is finally exposed. Melfiora watches with approval and pats Lillian on the head in praise. Still, she notes how thick the rind is and quietly resolves to add this detail to her encyclopedia later. Blanche immediately wonders how such a device can determine whether the fruit still contains magical energy, so Melfiora explains that it is infused with magic that detects any magical energy in whatever it pierces. Inside is a hollow chamber where a magic circle automatically activates. They are instantly impressed by the device, and Melfiora shares her larger goal to make monster meat safe and consumable for everyone. She also plans to distribute similar tools widely so ordinary people can use them with ease. When Melfiora inserts the device into the fruit, its tip begins to glow a vivid red, signaling that a large amount of magical energy still remains inside. Seeing this, Blanche suggests they remove the seed. She slices the fruit in half, and once its flesh is exposed, the sweet aroma intensifies, making them salivate. Blanche notices that it is different from the fruit she had tried in the past. Those had a yellowish-green color and a distinct scent. Blanche also adds that when they ate it, there were no severe side effects and any mild symptoms were easily neutralized with purifying water. However, the taste was difficult to recall because the smell had been so overpowering. With this, Melfiora suspects that the red fruit might have been unripe after all. When Melfiora retrieves the seed and pierces it with her device again, it doesn't register anything, confirming the fruit is safe to consume. As they prepare to test it for poison, Melfiora volunteers to go first, but Blanche immediately stops her, knowing she would be held responsible if anything went wrong. Lillian objects next, insisting she should taste it first since it was her idea to try the screamwood fruit, but Blanche refuses, reminding her that she is still a child. Natalie also protests, but before the argument escalates, Lillian impulsively takes a spoonful and eats it herself. Everyone is stunned, but Lillian beams with delight, savoring how sweet it is. Soon the others decide to take their own bites. Inspecting the flesh, they notice how soft and slightly sticky it is, a bright orange color yet translucent enough to resemble jelly. When Melfiora takes a bite, she feels as if she's been transported to another world. No wonder Mullen claimed it tasted better than luxurious nectar. Unlike many raw fruits that have a sharp edge to their sweetness, screamwood is purely sweet, making it instantly addictive. Blanche and Natalie hesitate at first, but seeing Lillian's fascinated expression tempts them to try their own bites. As soon as they do, they react just like Lillian, delighting in the unique flavor. Before long, half the fruit is gone. Lillian turns to Melfiora, thanking her, but Melfiora simply returns the gratitude. She explains that she has never tasted such a delicious monster fruit before, and had Lillian not mentioned Mullen's experience, she would never have discovered it. In that moment, Melfiora sincerely thanks Lillian for guiding her to this discovery. Then, Melfiora declares that it's time to serve Rogier next. Lillian asks if she thinks he will like it, and Melfiora feels confident knowing how delicious the fruit is. She shares how excited she is to let Rogier try it for himself, wanting to replace his past unpleasant experiences of the fruit with something enjoyable. She covers the remaining fruit with a board inscribed with a magic circle, explaining that it will protect the fruit from the air and preserve its freshness. On top of that, she places the flask she used earlier to cool it further. Lillian is amazed by this, but Blanche and Natalie feel compelled to apologize. They admit they didn't believe her at first and regret doubting her, bowing their heads to ask for forgiveness. Melfiora finds their apology unusual, considering they barely know her. Melfiora tells them they don't know much about her yet, even joking that she could commit evil acts. When they look puzzled, she lists them one by one, like opening all the windows, scattering dragon waste everywhere, or keeping all the delicious meat to herself. However, the Blanche court simply laughs at how absurd her examples sound. Sensing their amusement, Melfiora absent-mindedly mutters that maybe she'll hate the Duke and return to her lands one day. Unbeknownst to her, Rogier is standing right behind her, hearing her words. Rogier speaks. He is saddened at the thought that Melfiora might one day hate him and go back to her homeland. Melfiora is caught off guard, unsure how to respond. He continues, expressing how unfortunate it would be for him if she truly harbored such feelings. Though Melfiora tries to defend herself, insisting she doesn't hate him, Rogier remains firm in his disappointment. Melfiora realizes she has hurt Rogier and desperately begs for his forgiveness. Blanche quickly vouches for her, explaining that Melfiora only said it while demonstrating what evil acts she might do. Natalie also steps in, trying to clarify the situation, while Lillian adds that she only wanted Rogier to taste the screamwood fruit and was looking forward to enjoying it with him. Even saying those words makes Melfiora a little embarrassed. While Lillian isn't wrong, Melfiora feels uneasy hearing her feelings spoken by someone else. Rogier asks her directly if it was true, and she's unable to answer right away. With that, Lillian cheers her on, encouraging her to show the happy expression she wore earlier when she talked about Rogier. She speaks so fondly that Rogier's attention is fully captured, describing how Melfiora's eyes sparkled with excitement. Mortified, Melfiora begs her to stop, her face burning with embarrassment. Her reaction makes Rogier smile, and soon he laughs openly. That's when Melfiora realizes he has been teasing her all along and that he must have been eavesdropping earlier. Overwhelmed, she tries to run away, but Rogier catches her. She resists his embrace, prompting him to apologize for teasing her. Still, he admits he felt a little hurt seeing her enjoy herself with the Blanche court while he felt left out. Melfiora apologizes in return, knowing her words were careless even as a joke. Rogier also admits he understands she didn't mean it, though it still stung a bit, but it was his own punishment for eavesdropping. Melfiora grows curious about how Rogier managed to enter her room, so he shows her the secret door connecting their chambers. He admits he forgot to tell her that their rooms are linked, though he usually keeps the passage locked. This time, however, something he has been hiding happens to wake up. Melfiora becomes curious, and Rogier explains that she is about to see the gift he mentioned earlier. When he reveals it, a small Sirius puppy greets her. It is the same creature depicted on their seal, and Melfiora shrieks at how adorable it is. Rogier sets the puppy down and explains that they rescued it temporarily after it was attacked by monster birds in the woods. The puppy became separated from its parents, and the knights are still searching for them. And Melfiora can only hope they'll find them soon. Then Melfiora asks why Galbraith's guardian is a Sirius. Rogier explains that the first Duke once ruled alongside one, and ever since then, the Sirius has been the symbol of their land. He also adds that he tried feeding the puppy milk and beef, but it barely touched the beef. Since he has never raised a Sirius before, he admits he isn't sure what it prefers. Melfiora suggests feeding it monster meat instead, since it grew up in the wild. Agreeing with her, Rogier orders the Blanche courts to fetch some dragon feed, and they quickly comply. Left alone, the two of them finally relax. Rogier brushes his fingers through Melfiora's hair, though she insists that the puppy is far more pleasant to the touch. Rogier disagrees, claiming her hair feels better. Flustered, Melfiora can only sit there awkwardly, reminded of her role in soothing the Duke. Just then, Melfiora remembers that the Duke might be hungry, so she brings him a plate of the screamwood fruit. Rogier doesn't have fond memories of screamwood, but the scent is inviting, so he decides to take a bite. To his surprise, the flavor is so good that he admits he could eat it forever. Soon, the Blanche Corps return with feed for the puppy. It immediately rushes forward and starts eating, making everyone shriek at how adorable it looks. Melfiora grows curious about how the puppy will mature, and Rogier explains that it will become independent in about a year, though it will take 4 more years to fully reach adulthood. Lillian shows the seal on her uniform to Melfiora and asks if she has seen a fully grown Sirius. Melfiora admits she has only seen them in encyclopedias. Blanche tries to calm the puppy down as it eats too fast, but it refuses to slow down. In no time, it finishes the entire plate and then starts scratching at the carpet. Blanche immediately asks Lillian for a rag, sensing the puppy is about to have an accident. Rogier realizes they will face serious trouble if they do not find its mother soon. Although he plans to keep the puppy until it can find food on its own, caring for a Sirius will be difficult. Melfiora wonders how the first Duke ever tamed a Sirius, but Rogier insists it is only a legend. Still, Melfiora cannot help but question whether it is possible to keep a Sirius as a pet. The puppy soon grows attached to Blanche and sticks close to her side. Watching them, Rogier is reminded of Lillian as a child, always following Blanche around because she dreamed of becoming a knight. Lillian quickly tries to deny it, but Rogier only laughs, which makes Melfiora curious about how long Lillian has held onto that wish. Then Rogier mentions that it has already been 6 months since the blacksmith made Lillian her sword, so if Blanche allows it, they can take her on an expedition. Lillian instantly lights up with excitement, but Melfiora is more curious about the blacksmith. Rogier explains that it is the same craftsman who forged his sword, and the workshop is led by Blanche's husband Galio. Melfiora looks surprised, and Rogier quickly realizes she did not know. Blanche admits she never mentioned it before. When Rogier asks for Blanche's opinion of Melfiora, she answers by saying Melfiora handles blades with care and skill, and Blanche believes Galio would approve of her. At least that is what she wants to believe, but her husband is famously stubborn. Melfiora realizes Galio is extremely selective about whom he makes weapons for. Rogier confirms that even if he personally requested it, Galio would still insist on meeting Melfiora personally. There is no point in avoiding it, so Rogier calmly concludes that they should formally introduce them. Melfiora immediately becomes self-conscious, wondering whether Galio would approve of her skills in butchering monsters. Still, Blanche warns her that her husband is not only crabby but also foul-mouthed and that he can be rude at times. Even so, Melfiora is determined to meet him. Several days later, the chambermaids dress Melfiora in a beautiful gown. It is finally time for her debut, the moment when she must present herself before everyone as someone worthy of being their duchess. The maids offer encouragement, telling her to simply be herself. So Melfiora is reminded that she is the voracious villainess, and there's nothing else that can scare her now. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss new episodes every week.